what do they say? Kind of, you only hold the trophy in that moment, but you've had it all year. You just didn't know you had it. So at Henley Royal, you might have it on that day, and you've got a chaperone / bouncer / steward who's like watching like a hawk with that trophy. And, there's photos going on, but actually you've probably had it since September because of how you trained all year long. And then you hold it and you put it down, and then that's it. It gets handed to the next year because the cycle then changes. So you go into the 2027 season, and there are people who hold the trophy but just don't know it yet.
Hey, what is up? Welcome back to Last Stroke Counts. Today's guest is a performance director and head coach of Headington School in Oxford and GB junior coach Ryan Demaine. Welcome to the show.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. This one took a while, actually. We've talked about it for ages, but you're a busy man. With all the Headington stuff and the GB stuff, it's kind of difficult to get hold of you. You're literally always coaching,
which makes this even so sweeter that we get to sit down and chat the day before Henley Women's starts.
Yeah, a few days. Yeah. I mean, we'll start racing on Saturday. So tomorrow is the start of Henley Women's, so it should be quite exciting.
Nice.
It's always this time of year where your name keeps coming up, because everyone we talk to around this time of year, like coaches, always start talking about the difficulties between being able to ramp up for Nat Schools, Women's Henley, and have to do exams, and then the fight with like teachers and parents about it. And I always say, we talked to Ryan about this, and Ryan's got this spreadsheet, and he like read through the data, and actually like a few others have done the same thing now. So we spoke to Sam Townsend just earlier in the week, and he said the same thing. He's tracking the average school performance versus the Rose performance. So whenever this subject comes up, I'm sure we can get into this a bit later, but it's funny how your name just keeps coming up for that. So, and I remember when we talked about it, I thought that's really impressive. I think you are known as a bit of a spreadsheet guru. I'm sure we can get into the data side of things, which has obviously just become bigger and bigger over the last 10 years. Anyway, we were talking before about even upgrades coming this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that would like to call themselves the spreadsheet masters, but I think you may unofficially be the king of spreadsheets from what I've seen.
No, cool. My head is normally a bit of tends to jump around quite a bit. So, like having a little book or having something to write down. When I first started at Headington, I had this, we kind of, the girls used to joke about it, called it the Book of Power. Really, it was just a book of where all the madness went into. So I could keep track of scores, keep track of everything, because there's no ways I could have the capacity to remember everything. So over the years, and with, Google Drive getting a bit better, and Google Sheets, and been able to pop everything online, and then we can collaborate with all the coaches. And actually, we've got this vast data set on literally everything that is under 19 women's sweep or sculling, just under 19 women's sport, so to speak. So quite lucky actually that we've been in this kind of almost golden era of, before AI takes over. I still think it's the purity of coaching where you actually have to physically do things. I wonder what AI will bring, but
Well, AI is probably going to be trained on spreadsheets, just like the sort of data sets which you've collated. Yeah. So it can't really come up with anything new other than they can just do reinforced learning from what's already there, which is the big problem that the artists have, because they say that AI doesn't create anything new. It can only sort of make molds of and collages of what was in the past.
Yeah.
My school coach used to have always had a little black flip book that he'd write everything in. We just got his little black book, and he's got all the data in, and he would always keep it quite close. It was never left out. And we were on a training camp once, staying at a house in Sonning Common. We were training at Henley, and we were just messing about in the afternoon, whatever it was. And then one of the kids, I remember Will Byrne, runs in. He's like, he's left it out. Got the black book. I said, oh God, we're going to get like, this guy doesn't stop writing in this black book. Like, here we go. This is it. This is the knowledge. Flip it open, start looking in it. It's like it doesn't make any sense to us. Like, it's all just his like scribbling and like just, I don't know, I can't remember now if he like genuinely had like coded it in case anyone had nicked it. But it was, I just remember being like, damn, no knowledge for us.
I mean, some coaches have amazing capacity. Like you look at Rona from Tideway Scullers. I'm always in awe of how she just has everything. Like, and Shep, you go to ship and you'll be like, oh, so-and-so was in whatever. And he'll list the age from, 1990 something, and you're like, how do you remember that? I'd have to go back to my notes. So I kind of need those spreadsheets. Like I can remember ergo scores. You tell me one of my athletes' ergo scores for whatever weird reason, I can remember their 5K, their 2K, whatever I can, but when it comes to actually what the lineups were or whatever, of the world's 8, however many years ago, no chance. Yeah.
I can't remember full lineups of crews I was in. Ones that were a part of a team that I coached.
Go to Shep and ask him.
Yeah,
he'll remember. His brain is phenomenal.
I'm thinking maybe the difference comes from the fact that Shep just does the final selection versus you look after your athletes throughout the year. So there's different seat orders and there's illnesses along the way. So then you have to do a bunch of testing. So maybe that's why they just sort of blend into one.
Yeah. I mean, but remember with my role now with GB is I do that final selection.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like, what was that crew again? And so that's why I think having spreadsheets and having a real safety net, so to speak, because it's valuable. And actually, at the end of the day, you got to get it right because you're working with athletes, and but also there's a real data set that is invaluable. It's years in the making to try get an understanding of what makes things tick. So.
Right. Well, let's find out, like we always do, how you found rowing in the first place.
So my brother rowed at St Andrews College in Grahamstown. It's a small university school, kind of educational type town in the south of South Africa. And we used to go down to the coast and visit fairly frequently. And my parents would take me down there. There's a 7.5 years difference between my brother and I. And so. Kind of the first time I saw rowing was actually wasn't my brother even rowing. It was early morning. My parents would nip down to the fishing boats would come in on the Kawi River. If you ever want an amazing rowing venue, the Kawi River is it. It is, people talk about Lucerne. It's got nothing on the Kawi. But it kind of, you have the fishing boats coming in. It's a very narrow channel, narrow river, no wider than kind of, the Thames in Oxfordshire, really, the widest bits there. And kind of misty morning, and I wasn't interested in being in the fish shop, so kind of walked over to the bridge and was just staring down at the river, and there's fog and all that kind of stuff. And I heard this kind of like weird, kind of like rhythmical kind of the sound of a finish that I now know, but I was like, what the hell is that? And I was looking down, and next thing this bow of the 8 shot out and just kind of, drew out with these 8 rows, jackknifing left and right and around the pin. And I thought that's pretty cool, And next thing it just disappeared into the mist, and I was like, this is awesome. Now that I know it was Rhodes University at the time, which was at the time a juggernaut of rowing. That's where most of the South African Springboks rowers came from, and then years later I'm seeing my brother race, and then next thing I know I'm rowing at St Andrews College in Grahamstown, and I'm quite easily the worst rower in the whole school. So I'm putting a single scull, and I had the disadvantage of being a year older, so I wasn't put with my year group, so I was a year behind the guys I was meant to be rowing with. So they're like, okay, Wine will probably quit soon, so just leave him a single and he can just go up and down. And I think my first coach session, the coach just left me because I spent more time swimming. And so, actually I was rowing up and down the bank, and there's another guy who was almost as bad, not quite, but he was always a bit quicker. And this guy on the bank who was a student at Rhodes walks down. He's got literally 2 beers in his hands, and he kind of pops one down because he's saving that for later. And he's sipping away, and he's watching us kind of up and down the straight. And he's like, my brother rode, you're bigger than he is. Why is he beating you? And that was my first coach sessions with me, him getting me to do pause drills up to the bridge and then back down. And he literally just sat there watching us. Had no idea who he was. To this day, I have no idea who he was. But that was kind of like, I was like, oh, this is some drills I've got now, and I've got a little toolbox of things to do. So rode that season, and from having my first regatta like a week before that event, and it was a 500 meter race at the Buffalo. It's a famous race in South Africa. And the next race was overtaking my race, which was me several hundred meters behind the finishes of that, and then kind of finishing at national schools, again, putting the single, just try and hopefully you don't capsize. And I think I made it to like a back end final, but I didn't come last, which for me, I was like the happiest kid on the planet. You know, I thought I'd won like, you know, the world championships by doing that. I beat one person or two people. And that's kind of how my rowing career sort of took off. I definitely wasn't talented. Definitely wasn't someone who had an ounce of natural gift or feel for rowing. So yeah.
How old were you when you started single sculling?
That was 14. So I was 14 years old.
14,
And I spent about 2 years in the single, and then they needed someone for basically, which was a reprobate 8. It was the third 8, which basically anyone who had to pick a summer sport. So everyone at the school had to do a sport. So some of the guys were like, well, we can do rowing and we can just row up the top and hide around the bend and no one will bother us. And I just get so annoyed because I just wanted to kind of like, finally I'm in an 8 and this is great. And for me, the third 8 was like, you know, I kind of associated with rugby, and our school had like 17 odd rugby teams. Every single pupil played rugby at the school. It's like, you know, there's one thing you're going to do. You're going to hold your academic standard and you're going to play rugby. If you don't do either of those, you're out, type thing. And so when I thought, you know, third boat, this is a pretty big deal. And it wasn't. It was, you know, there was some members where they row around the corner and they're like, they would want to light up a cigarette. And that was a big no-no at my school. And I was like, I was the youngest member in that boat. And there's some equivalent to sixth formers at the time who were, now when I look at really good characters, but also they weren't really interested in rowing. So yeah.
It's interesting. So obviously a lot of people get into rowing, find that they're quite good at it, and that's what keeps them coming back. What was it for you, even though you sort of self-proclaimed not very good at it, but it's all relative? What was it about rowing that kept you coming back if it wasn't the results?
I wasn't good at any sport, if I'm being really. I mean, athletics I was pretty good at. I could run and I could swim. But you know, there's a kind of, my brother was a role model. So, you know, kind of was like, okay, at some point things will click. And if I just train harder than other people, then it'll be fine. And then there was a turning point where I came home one day, and in retrospect, it was the worst gift someone can give you. But actually the time was like amazing. And I was given an ergo by my dad, and he's like, there's an ergo. So the old ones with the kind of little flaps on the bicycle wheel.
The actual bicycle wheel?
Yeah.
Or the one with a cage?
It had a cage.
So like a Model B, yeah.
So it was a step up from that. And so our training was get on the ergo every night, and we had a 10-minute ergo test at St Andrews, and just do a 10-minute ergo test every night. That would be fine. And it was both horrific, but it was also quite a cool thing to do. So, well, not cool thing. I mean, maybe I was just a bit nuts. And kind of now in retrospect, you think I definitely was on the spectrum of some sort, but it was a really good thing to go do. And then later on, like I'd come to rain camp, and then I'd just be quite fit, and I'd use that month-long holiday, and that always start day one of rain camp was ergo test. So I'd be quite fit, and then I'd find myself in maybe the second 8, and you know, trialing for the first 8, but they'll look at how I rode and they're like, no chance, you know, getting back, just putting. So, but I was really lucky. I had some amazing coaches. A guy, there was a guy who took over the third 8, a guy called Barry Banks, he's a legend in South Africa for a load of things, but you know, he was the guy who taught us to work hard. Like he would get us to do these ridiculous pieces on the water, which now you'd probably wouldn't do, but we loved it. It was like, it's like being in, I don't know, I don't know, when you think back to the hardest stuff you've done, it kind of brings a crew together. And then we had a really successful season that year. I think it was my second year in the third 8. And that year wasn't the kind of retrobet 8 because Barry, there's no chance that would float with Barry. There's enormous road rower, and he, so we pretty much had a really successful season until the national champs, where we were probably touted to win the third 8s, and then I caught a monster crab and ended that dream for the whole crew. And then the following year was second 8, and the following year was first 8. So, but you know, through that journey, there were some really good people around me. The guy called Luke Hartley took our second 8, and he sat down with me one evening and was like, you need a training program for the holiday that makes sense, not just an ergo test every night. So there was lots of mileage in it. And, and he was like, how often do you want to train? I was like, as much as I can. And so he gave me 2 sessions a day over the holiday, and I followed that religiously. So when I came back again, I was really fit for the next season. Kind of trialed for the first date, then was dropped. And then I did a term in the first date after Luke's program, and then was dropped from that. So, I had this like really vivid memory going, well, I'm just, this is a temporary thing. You just got to row in the second date. And I remember my kind of hands just bleeding and like just working as hard as I can, because the coaches will notice, and the coach was like, no, Ryan rows too badly. Let's just pop in the second date and he'll learn. And we got him back next year. And then luckily the next year I had a guy called Warren Boltler who is still legendary to this day in terms of as a coach in South Africa terms, who had a really good sense and feel for boats and had a lot of success with St Andrews at the time. And before he had arrived, the school hadn't won the national championships in 30 years. And then the next thing had the string of wins under him. And I was lucky that he was one of our coaches. So it was an interesting journey, but I think I was more stubborn than anything else. And also like the guys I was around at St Andrews were just gems. Like, the town is like a mixture between city folk and farming stock. So it's a really humble school, but also has a lot of pride and kind of culture and values, which I've kind of brought into the kind of schools that I've been in since.
That's good.
Really fun memories of the school.
It's sort of as a coach, it's like the dream athlete, really, is the athlete that just wants to train as much as they physically can, but also would follow your program religiously. You're like, yes, this is the kid I want.
Yeah, your attitude to improvement and then trying to increase your performance, I guess, is just something that you were born with.
I don't know. I mean, like I had a weird like little hiccup. I hated sports in prep school, and then there was a point where where I fell ill. It was random. It was like a December, and I started having nosebleeds, and it was weird stuff like this. And now I'm kind of going back to when I'm 12 or so, and then next thing I know, like I'm in hospital getting X-rays in absolute agony. My hips blown up. I thought it was somewhere on my leg. Had no idea where the pain was coming from or radiating from. And the doctor's like, okay, we need to operate on your hip. It's osteomyelitis. It's really serious. Keep the leg, remove the leg, keep the leg, remove the leg. One of those kind of conversations. At the same time, it was kind of like a perfect kind of like storm where at that hospital, when they give kind of babies the drips and that kind of stuff, there was a spate of like people just going downhill and dying. So I had those drips and I wasn't getting well. I was meant to be in the hospital for like a week, and then 2 weeks went on and 3 weeks went on and then a month, and just wasn't getting well. But during that time, I remember like going, all I want to do is go outside, so you kind of go and you kind of think, like I could have done all of that when I was younger, but at a very young age, you're suddenly kind of going, oh geez, this is quite serious. And now I'm locked indoors and I'm you're literally in a bed the whole time. So that kind of probably sparked the whole sports thing. So the athletics came from that because, I was on crutches for 3 months after that and another 6 months off sports. So it was like hell watching all my friends at prep school, doing sport that they loved.
So it's in such a bad thing comes a good thing from you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right?
Yeah.
You kind of experience not being able to do it. And then that makes the tough times harder because you're like, I'm outside.
Yeah. So came to my first sports day, and I thought I was going to push myself as hard as I could, not only sports day, the lead up to sports day. And I remember really vividly kind of doing everything as hard as I could. And I wasn't the fastest by any standard. But then I got on the bus on the way home and I was like, I wasn't feeling great. And I had never experienced this feeling. The next thing I just threw up, it's like what, you had no idea that obviously, at such a young age, so I had that probably in me from a really young age. Like you have that hospital stuff, and that was pain. Sport had nothing in comparison to the level of pain and stuff that you go through in that situation. And then you go to sport and like, I'm doing this is great, and this is endorphins, and I'm feeling good, and
you're actually improving.
Sorry,
and you're actually improving. Fitness, everything's going up.
Yeah. So then when I went to St Andrews, I was a good athlete because I had swum loads and that kind of stuff and run loads. But then I was just, I was a year old, and as a maybe if they had more coaches, they could have said, let's just put him in a skill and invest some coaching into him. He might turn out well. So I think there is that thing you ask, is it nature versus nurture or whatever. It wasn't in me initially. I think it was lack of a better phrase, probably beaten into me in terms of like having to go to hospital and having to have a really serious operation and then just undergo weeks and weeks of just, not knowing which way I was going, fevers and all sorts of things going on. It was only actually when they, you're having these needles poked into you all the time, and it was like torture. It was like, you're young and you're just like, yeah. So it was an interesting time.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea that's something that you had to go through so early, obviously in your life. But then that makes sense why even though maybe you weren't getting the results that you wanted to in rowing to start with, it just kept you coming back because it didn't matter, because your sort of priority set was maybe a bit different. Like, grateful for the opportunity to even be out on the water, let alone walk. Like, I imagine if you got that discussion of should you keep the leg or should you get rid of it, part of you has to make peace with the fact that it might be gone. So the fact that it's almost like you got given a lottery ticket.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't even a discussion I was party to, because actually that's with the parents. And, God knows what my parents went through with that. I remember at the time kind of, because, we didn't have an NHS there. And I think the medical bills nearly completely floored my parents. Because, at the time, like, I remember my parents going, this is more than your brother's entire school fees type thing that he went to St Andrews. So, so it was an interesting time with that. But being outdoors after that on a lake or on a river, or and particularly in South Africa, because we had the privilege of rowing on a game reserve. So there was Tom the Rhino, as he was affectionately called, and he had the largest horn in Africa. So. Every now and then you'd be rowing, you just stop and watch this, like, absolutely just, miracle of an animal in front of you. So we were really lucky. And now when you think back to it, you kind of go, like, we had that dream environment of growing up in what is effectively rural Africa. Although the town was really kind of like, and the buildings and all that kind of stuff at the school were phenomenal, make no mistakes. And Andrews is a very impressive school, so much so that if I had a boy, that's where he'd go to school. I wouldn't send him to any of these schools here. So I'm not doing some marketing. I'm not paid by St Andrews, but it is a sensational place to grow up and be part of.
It's a strange thing, isn't it? I remember hearing a thing with something, if you wanted to create a perfect human or a tough person, what would you put them through in order to get there? And it wouldn't be nothing. And it's a weird thing in life where actually sometimes you can feel like, having gone through something really bad, that it's like a negative, or why me, or this is unfair. But what you can get out the back end of it, sometimes more than if you'd never gone through it before. It's just like a weird paradox kind of thing, isn't it? The tough things make life better sometimes.
The best athletes I have character, and because they've been through something.
Yeah.
And you can't have character without being through something.
Yeah.
I'd say that about the coaches I've seen, or like, everyone has their own story, and you look to different people, and some of the best here in this country, Bobby Thatcher's of this world, phenomenal coach. They've been through something, and it hasn't been easy, and everyone goes, no, it wasn't.
So then, coming to the end of school, your next phase, did rowing have an effect on that? What you wanted to go and do next? That was kind of kept wanting to do this and take it further.
So I went. There were our coaches were from Rhodes University, so a lot of them, and the new national head coach of South Africa is a guy called Andrew Grant. At the time, he was a sensational rower, and he happened to be coaching at the school at the same time, and he was really impactful in terms of where I went. I liked his attitude. Like, I remember when one of my friends saying, I'm training for the first date, and he turned around and he said something along the lines of, you don't train for the first date, you train to win. And there were a few effings in there. And he, he had a really good understanding about what it meant to be an athlete. And what do they say? If you want to be successful, surround yourself with like-minded, successful people. And, there were a cohort of people at Rhodes at the time who were sensational people. So I was attracted to go there because of that. There's another guy called Gregor Calderwood who's now up in Ezra. I saw him for the first time at national schools. I haven't seen him in 20 odd years, but his daughter's actually rowing for Ezra. And he was part of the reason I went there. He's just really good, grounded guy. And he was like, had a really good sense of where the university was at and what they wanted to do. It was also a really successful university. And at the time was also one of the top academic universities in the country. So, I was lucky to get in and lucky to get the courses that I was doing. But I was rowing for the university because our year starts from January and goes to December. But term only starts kind of like end of January, February, and they accept pretty late there. So I was rowing in that January camp, not even knowing if I had been accepted to the university. So, and there's a number of us. There's a guy, interesting guy, if he's ever over here, you probably want to speak to him, but Grant Parkin, who rowed with me at school and also rowed there. He's just written a book, but actually he talks a bit about that whole, that month before where you don't know if you're going to be at the university. And but also we were quite lucky that the guys were like, don't worry, just come along and we'll see what happens. And next thing you know, you're racing and competing for a university that you're part of. But that's where I went to. I spent a long time at the university. So best lifestyle ever. Rowing was the main sport of the university. It's kind of like the Brooks of South African kind of rowing. It had a really, really good pedigree and in terms of where you were at, but also the academic side was, it was linked to Rhodes, kind of the Oxford Rhodes type thing. Mm-hmm. So, but also the guys trained hard and so I did a number of years there. And then, there was a time where they're like, okay, you've got your kind of qualifications and all that kind of stuff. And now it's time to go to Joburg, because if you actually want to, row for South Africa, you need to be in Johannesburg. So I went to Johannesburg with essentially what was my crew from Rhodes and a few others, and we trialed for the squad. And I think 5 days before we were due to go to Commonwealth Games and World Student Games, my left lung decided to have a puncture. So I had a pneumothorax, and that was
like a rib fracture.
No, it was just a lung collapsed lung. So woke up one morning and my sternum was really sore, my back was really sore. Went to meet in the car park, and my coach at the time, a guy called Tim Hempstead, he met us at the car park, and we're kind of gained perfect storm. He had an armed robbery the night before, where they held him and his family at gunpoint. Now, this guy was a ex-special forces reconnaissance guy. The recce's in South Africa were a class of their own. They were dropped into hot zones by themselves. Like I could go on for hours about Tim, but a phenomenal human being and an even better coach. And he met us and he was like, "Look, guys, I'm not coming down to the water today, but you guys need to kind of get down there yourself." And then he went off and spoke to the police and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, "Well, my sternum back's a bit sore." And he's like, "Just take it easy today. Let's see what happens." And went down to the lake, decided to do the warm-up run with everyone else. It took about 3 steps. And the only way I can describe it is, like if you feel like a nachi or like if you're peeling an orange and kind of has that kind of pee. If you imagine the sound that makes, there's that kind of feeling and sensation of something peeling. And I took a few steps, like, guys, I'm just going to touch my toes a few times and stretch. And so the crew ran off. A really good friend of mine again, and another South African rower, a legend in South African rowing, a guy called Andrew McLaughlin, comes up. He had it all night at the Lakers. He had a good time, and and basically he turned on me. He's like, "You're right." And he was like, "Yeah, my back's a bit sore, my sternum's a bit sore," and kind of cocked his head. And our philosophy was just like pardon up and get out there. So grabbed the boat and got on the water and did my 120 minutes. And my heart rate was a bit weird and wasn't feeling great. And then we went out again for a 75-minute session, and I was like, fuck, really not feeling great. So went home, and my mom was like, you're right. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm just going to go have a shower. And she was like, no, I think we need to get this x-rayed. My mom was never that kind of woman. Like she used to race horses with broken ribs and stuff. She was a tough woman. And
You must have started to go grey or something.
yeah, and she was like, no, I'm taking you to the hospital. Went to the hospital. Long story short, a few x-rays later, and the doc's like, it's pressing on your heart and we need to get you into hospital. And because I was an athlete and invincible at the time, I didn't have medical insurance. So, I remember at the time going, this doctor kind of cut a little slice in the side of me, and he was like, we'll put a pipe in there and we'll sort that out. And, the air will come out of where the puncture is. Essentially, a collapsed lung is where essentially you have a puncture in the lung and it fills the cavity and it pushes the lung down. Eventually, you lose function of the lung. And with the left lung, it's pressing on the heart, so it can become quite serious. And I was asking the doctor, like, so, what kind of doctor are you? And he's like, no, I'm a cardiac surgeon. And I'm like, oh God. And in my mind, it was like, this money was just ticking over. I mean, when I walked into reception, I put the card on the table and they said, it's going to be a 5,000 Rand deposit. Well, at the time, my job coming up, I was going to be earning 4,000 Rand a month. And that was like for the first, just to be sat down and seen. And my dad came in and to kind of like countersign for things. And basically before I knew it, I was like, after having done really well for myself through university and stuff, had a kind of business when I was at university and used to come over here and work during the holidays. So I was like, I was wealthy in comparison to some of most of the students. I was completely bankrupt before I'd even stepped out even had that pipe come into me. I remember joking with going, can the nurse not just do the pipe thing, And he was like, no. So that ended my rowing career. That was it.
How old were you?
I was about 25-ish.
Oh my God.
So I phoned up Lawrence Ndlovu, who stroked the 4 at the Olympics in London, or Sizwe Ndlovu, as he's known. And he I just said, look, there's a trip going over with the 4. He had just come back from the under-23s. And so he filled in for me, and the 4 did really well. They won gold at Commonwealth. I think they were 3rd at student games. And that was obviously quite tough to watch because this is your dream. This is everything you've been looking forward to. And so that was it. And Sizwe went over, thankfully saved the day. But there was another thing is I had paid for the trip, and South African Rowing said, look, we can't ask Sizwe to pay for that. We'll cover it. It's fine. South African Rowing will pay you back, but you just get the trip off. It's happening now. By the time we had sorted it in 3 days' time and changing tickets and all that kind of stuff. And I'm still kind of like nursing my lung and, just out of hospital. And I couldn't travel because it's a pneumothorax. And and then, a few months later, I'm like, can I have that money back? Because like, I'm really skint. And like now I'm on credit cards and stuff. And they're like, yeah, about that. We don't have any money to give you. So again, you're bankrupt. Now you're even more so. So that was, I was going to stay in South Africa at St. Albans, which is a really good school that I was working at in Johannesburg, very much like St. Andrews. So I'd set up the sculling program there in that year and actually coached my first junior world's crew off the back of that. And that was 2003. So it was the Olympic qualifier for Athens. Not qualifier, Olympic test event.
Yeah.
For the junior worlds, the one that was just shortened to 1,000 meters, and because of how windy it was. But so I eventually came to the end of the year, and the interest was exceeding anything I could pay back. So I made the decision in December to pack up and fly over and just try to earn pounds because the pound is pretty strong. So I was working every job I could, weekends, afternoons, evenings, pub work, whatever I could to earn any money I could. Supply teaching, which is a different world itself. Yeah.
I was. So did you start coaching before you had to finish rowing? Was that something you sort of kind of dabbled in to make money in and stuff?
Yeah. So at St Andrews, the headmaster the deputy at the time, a guy called Tom Hamilton, recruited me to be a history teacher while I was doing my PGCE. And then while I was there, I was also coaching rowing at St Andrews. So I was really lucky to work under a guy called John Gehring, who used to coach at Radley. I still think one of the best coaches I've ever worked with, and a sensational human being. So he mentored me at the time, and so I coached that. And then when I went up to St Albans at that time, the guy employed me when he was deputy head, Tom Hamilton. He had become headmaster of St Albans, so he saw me at a regatta and said, "Look, I've got a small rowing club. Would you come over?" And I was like, "St Albans who? Like, I don't even know if they row." And the best they'd done was like a fifth in the C final at the SA Champs. And so I took over that program, and a year later we had a medal in every age group. There was only two coaches, myself and a guy from Australia, from New Zealand. He'd kill me if I said Australia. Thomas Reefoy Butler, and a New Zealand kid, and he came over for a year as a kind of gap student. And we ran this program together, and just upped the training horrifically, and compared to what they were used to. And then so this really good sculling group came out of it. And we only allowed 30 boys in the squad, so that was my limit. I was restrained with that by the school, because they wanted to detract away from the real G sports. Well, it was a rugby. Actually, we didn't have to compete with rugby. I think the key was I went to the rugby coach and said, "Look, I will make your rugby team really fit. Send me your big guys." And so we started getting these guys in, but I was only there for a year because obviously I had the lung thing and the finance thing and all that going on. So then one of the guys who was coaching South African rowing said, "Look, we're not going to send a sculling squad over to the Worlds, but we've got to keep the scullers happy." So, and he was one of the junior coaches. "We're going to focus on the sweep team, but I need to just kind of have a trials process." So I was like, doesn't sit well with me, but let's just see if there's a qualification thing. They have to meet a certain percentage. Let's see what we can do. So I literally phoned up anyone who made the A final in sculling. I had like four quads worth of scullers. And we got a longer process there, because it goes from February, March, April, May, June, July, and then you got August with the Worlds. And I got a guy called Roger Tobler who had rowed in a lightweight 4. So this is my first big coaching gig. So I was like, I'm going to lean on anyone who was experienced. Luke Hartley, who was at St Stithians at the time. John Gehring, who came up with his 4 from South Africa, from Grahamstown, and anyone and everyone who would help, I leaned on. And then slowly these sweepers would start getting dropped from the sweep team, and I'd just go into my boat bay, and I'll try them as part of the group. And one of the things in South Africa was like, you could only, they wanted to select from one region, fair, because it's such a big country, you can't really. So you'd have a Gauteng crew and an Eastern Cape crew and a Western Cape crew and whatever. And you'd have to go to the qualification regatta. And then, but I had 2 boys from different state schools and 2 boys from different private schools, which was a big no-no. But they were the fastest boys, and that became the quad. It qualified. The sweep team didn't qualify. So these guys are now distraught. And I'm like, okay, guys, into my boat bay. We'll have a chat. The coach of that group has a big falling out with the selectors. I go to the selectors on bended knee saying, "Look, there's another regatta coming up. Can I try build something from this group? There's some really good athletes there. Let me see if I can get an 8 together." And they're like, and so we start selecting a boat, and over time that then qualifies. And then so we sent that year a junior coxed for my quad, and then the 8 to the Junior Worlds in Athens, which was a really cool experience. So a lot of the scullers turned sweepers, which was again a first. And I was really lucky that people like Luke and Roger were essentially independent selectors. So we haven't had that before. The coach just had free reign, and got the parents involved, and like making sure there was really good communication there, and ran essentially a development program. And a lot of those guys kept rowing. Like, I don't know if you know, and Lester, he rowed for Thames and won numerous Henleys at Thames. He was part of that 8. So it was a really cool little gig.
It sounds like the beginnings of sort of what we would see as high performance now. Like the idea that you had to stay in, like GB rowing. That was 30 years ago, where you would go to trial in your boat, and now we run a system where, no, hang on, if we put this in a group and we trial them and push them, we can make faster boats by not keeping them in the system. So like being the first person in the country to make that happen is a pretty big deal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally, I just hadn't. Maybe ignorance was bliss, and maybe that's why it happened. So.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of caring aspects of trying to look at athletes who've just been rejected from being able to represent their country and be like, actually, maybe I can make something out of you. So it seems like that human element was with you even back then, perhaps maybe because of what you've been through as an athlete. And then you just wanted to give others the opportunity that perhaps you couldn't have because of obviously what happened with the lung and everything. There's so many really interesting things that we've just kind of like gone over. I wanted to ask a question because you mentioned at the start that perhaps rowing didn't quite click for you. Do you remember the pivotal moment when you started to understand the stroke, how to move the boat? Because based on what you've just told us at the start, maybe it took you a little while to figure it out, but by the end you were a pretty good rower that knew how to move a boat fast.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I'd say I was all right. As a rower.
Hardy said the same thing.
They qualified yourself for a boat to go to the Commonwealth. That's a good standard.
I think there were some really patient coaches who worked with me. Tim Hempstead was an interesting guy by all intents and purposes, unpaid, came down and coached us. Coached us at Rhodes, and the amount of time he gave up of things. Years after that whole incident with my lung and that kind of stuff, Tim kind of, he didn't continue with South African rowing, which is, I think, unfortunate because he was good. He came out to the UK and I got this random message that he had turned up from Australia with his wife. And I was like, this is amazing. So I rushed down to London, met up with them. I was like, why don't you come to Oxford for a bit and come out on the launch with me? And bear in mind, the guy at that stage hadn't coached for 15 years. And he came to the launch and he's like watching the stubble. And I had put Katie Greaves with Matteo. Katie had done, I think at that point, 3 Olympics, and she was helping out one of our students.
I remember that because we were coaching down at Gloucester at the time.
Yeah,
I remember seeing that double going out a few times.
Yeah, so Matteo had aged out of being able to race Henley, but Katie was typical Katie, just like happy to jump in with anyone and just be her normal, awesome self with people. And she jumped out in the stable with Matteo so Matteo could have a chance. And I phoned her up and said, look, would you consider maybe jumping in like, a week before or 2 weeks before Henley just to, and she's like, no, if we're going to train her, we'll train her properly. And, it's Katie's kind of remit. And so for Matteo, it was great to be jumping in with an Olympian. And so coaching this was awesome. But then Tim came along and he's watching this thing. I said, Tim, come on, you can say a few words. He goes, well, I haven't coached in 15 years. And so he starts coaching the double. And the next thing, after Tim jumping in for once, he ends up staying for about 2 weeks and he starts coaching a bit more. And I remember speaking to Katie and she's like, I've been coached by a lot of really good coaches in my life. Tim is up there with some of the best. And so I was lucky to have him when he was at his prime. Tim used to jump out in the launch with Harry Mann, and whenever Harry Mann was out in South Africa. So same with like John Gehring. So that's where this kind of like feel for rowing came from. And so in terms of me, I think I've just been lucky to have really good coaches around me. Christian, as we know, Falco, he's phenomenal, and he was the head coach at the time. So I don't think there was a moment where, the Dunning-Kruger effect, kind of like, everyone knows so much, like your college rowers, they row for a term, like they're professionals at it. And then suddenly they start learning and it gets this Olympic stand, they realize how little they know. And eventually, I don't think I've ever hit that point where I know I'm still learning, and I'm hopefully will that's what makes the sport exciting. Whenever we employ people, I employ people because we want really good people. Chris Hermes, one of the best coaches in the country, he's our head of rowing, and I'll say that openly and actively because he's a sensational coach, which I'm lucky to work with. And we bounce ideas off each other and views off each other. You got, Antonia Waite, who's come in. She worked with that first in between 3 crew that ended up, that was the foundations of her coaching that came in. So there's our senior squad coaches at Headington. There's some really good caliber, and then you kind of go, essentially down the chain. I say down the chain, but actually it's more like this. It's more of a horizontal coaching system, because if anyone comes and works with us, they need to bring good ideas. They need to provide things to the table. If they're going to learn from us, I want to learn from them too. And there's things like you watch how people interact. And I've got, coaches there who have a really good manner, interpersonal skill with people. And I wish I could have that. Like that's a really cool, because I'm very much, I have a bit of a wall with me. I'm not a person where I allow people into my space. So with the athletes, I think they feel that, whereas some people are much more warm, like Antonia is so warm and stuff. And I think they need that in their environment.
It's good for an athlete to have a duality of different types of coaches. And then also perhaps that's something that you'd like to improve on, but I actually don't necessarily think that's a pejorative. That's not a bad thing, that you have that wall, because then you still maintain that sort of respectful relationship with the athlete, and then there's that sense of authority. So then you don't have to over explain yourself, and then you have less athletes challenging your decisions. I mean, obviously taking feedback on board is good, but I don't necessarily think keeping that sort of authoritative distance is a bad thing.
Yeah. I think there's quite the difference between, we've talked about being assistant and a head coach is a very different role. And when we work together as a head coach, sometimes I would be like, they need a bollocking. Hey, can you go and give them a bollocking? Because that's a different, this just feels different, because it's coming from a coach, not the selector. It's quite often people just get very much more in their head. And I think that's, it's just part of the sport. And it would be nice to do both. But you realize in order to be the best head coach, I think there does have to be that little separation.
But it's also different with coaching girls, with boys. I always say this: the girls don't care what I've achieved as a coach. I could say I'll coach these Henley winning crews or whatever, or these junior worlds crews. They don't care. They care how much you care about what they're doing. Actually. Whereas with boys, it's what is the CV of my coach who's working with me? Are they good enough to be working with me? Whereas I think on the girls' side, it's much more about that. There is that there has to be there is a different approach. It always infuriates me when people go, well, the girls can just follow the boys' training program, and how should we interact with you? I think there's the elements where there has to be that the tough side, but you can also really lose a girls group by being too tough. And there are times where I think the girls will remember where I've had to be really honest, but you're treading such a fine line when you do that. So you've got to be careful about those, and particularly nowadays, I think people are much more aware of how they want people to treat you in a certain way. And I think we've got to be mindful of that there's a different generation coming through, and they're much more mindful of that. In my day, it was like teacher would throw a ball duster at you and swear at you a few times and tell you that you're stupid. That would never happen in this day and age, nor should it. It wasn't healthy. And I think now, that those interpersonal, that side of things, and always having a door open, always allowing athletes to self-regulate, which we're really big on. It's like if an athlete messaged me and going, I'm up to here, I've got no capacity for training today. I'm feeling ill, I haven't slept, XYZ's going on. You've got to go, cool, I respect your space. Take some time, take today off. I'll see you tomorrow. And then I might get a message tomorrow going, actually, I'm still not feeling great. And it happened this week. One of my athletes was like, I'm up to here. And, got Women's Henley, and Monday, Tuesday, she needed to miss that. But, Wednesday, we were out yesterday, and she was on fire. She was better for that. So I think there has to be that kind of that give. Coaches, but
I think it's like a level of trust that you give, even though they're juniors still, although some of them are 17, 18, like young adults. I think there's always been programs I've been involved in where I felt like the coaches has been maybe not giving you any trust, or not sort of trusting that if you came in and said, I don't feel very well. Every time I had a coach, you would come in the morning and be like, my heart rate's up 10, I got a sore throat. And they would turn around and go, oh, well, I guess the rest of your force not rowing today then.
No, that's
And then you'd be like, okay, I don't want to let everyone else down. I'll jump in the boat. But I think that's sort of, I always find it's like, hang on, I've given up a lot to be here. I'm not just trying to pull a sickie for nothing. I think that's the level. And again, when in a program like Headington, I think you can accept that these girls have worked their ass off to be here.
Yeah.
And they're not just trying to pull a sickie for no reason.
That trust gets reciprocated. If you treat someone like an adult, they will show up for you as an adult, versus if you treat them like a kid that needs a scolding, etc., eventually they're not going to want to buy into the program and the philosophy. So if you're trying to run something like this, naturally, the more sort of respect you give them as an individual, I think that just it's human nature to want to reciprocate that.
I think it's kind of coming back to the kind of where I was as an athlete is I always had really good people around me, and I don't, in stuff, we didn't really get that environment too much of coaches being, really authoritarian. They had to work with their athletes because there were so few, and you lose one and then you got none. So it's not like here in the Thames region where you can kind of go, okay, well, I've lost that one, I'll pop this one. It's there has to be a lot more care, and you see that with the coaches out there as you go sit in a launch with someone who's working with 3 athletes who are on the Olympic pathway, and they will really be careful about how they're operating with them. And
Talking about Ben Welburn,
I'm talking about Andrew Grant. He's very careful, So I think in SA it's like we have to have people who are like that. So over here, I think that's something that we've taken into. Is I remember one stage really early at Headington, lots of people getting like really bad injuries, and I wasn't head coach at the time, and we had this conversation together. And it was like, we're not in the job to have people getting injured. And I think part of it was because the girls really wanted to perform, and they felt they had to be on, it's a really academic school, Headington, with the rowing. And then you take those two combinations and you've got someone who they might kind of try hide if they've got a niggle, they might try hide that they've got whatever, and actually making sure they really have that permission to kind of step back if they need to. I think that's more important.
Yeah. I remember sort of increasing the training load on the program. It's like, right, I know what we need to do in order to win. You've all told me you want to win, so we add a bit more mileage pre-season and everything. And then I added a bit more for Christmas, and we came back from Christmas and there were a lot of injuries. And I was like, damn, that's my fault.
Yeah.
Like, that's my fault because I pushed them to this point that now we're struggling with injuries. And I never really sort of thought about that as a coach's aspect of being like, asking more of someone and then injuring them is like a difficult perspective.
The moment you increase by 10% volume, you are it's something like 60% increase in risk. But also likewise, if you come off and you kind of go, cool, we're going to have like 5 days off completely, you again increase your risk of injury. So there's a real balance in terms of how you're training people. You can't just train hard.
I always say the mad example is that during the Tour de France, there are 2 off days, and the riders will go for a ride.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And it's because actually that's better for your body than nothing.
And just stopping.
Let's go properly into Headington then. So 2004, you come over here, you're trying to get every job you possibly can to make money.
Yeah.
How did you happen to get into Headington?
Yeah, so I applied for a few jobs. I was turned down from a few. Applied for Pangbourne just to kind of do a general coaching job. Applied for Bedford. And then there's a few others that I didn't even get a look in. Like my CV didn't even go across the desk, I don't think. And then the Headington one came up as maternity cover, and then I went in as an IT teacher as maternity cover. So and then at the end of that kind of season, the head of rowing left like really suddenly, and they were like, "Look, Ryan, you're a teacher here. You're going to be interim head of rowing because actually you're not what we want, but just can you look after things?" And so from about the following December. So I arrived in the April, did that season, and then from that December, I took on the head of rowing position. And I was lucky to have someone like Andy Green, who was head coach at the time. And he just obviously knew everyone and everything. And, he was a really good mentor, and kind of, he'd phone me up and go, is this done? Is this done? Is this done? In fact, the amount of times he saved my ass. And then there were things that, you do in South Africa, which you can't do here. So I just thought, like, when you go to national schools, I can say it now because it's so water under the bridge, but you could just take the kids on a trip and take them to the hotel and pop them in there and then take them to the course and they race. But there's also paperwork that goes behind that. In South Africa, you just say, all right, parents, not even, you meet them in the car park and go, on next week, we're going down to the Eastern Cape. I'm driving them in a minibus, 10 hours, and we've got the trailer, and then we're going to go race there. And is that all cool? And that's cool. Okay, that's permission. Done. In the UK, it's not the case. No, there are forms to be filled out. And
wow, okay.
So Andy was really good with all of those things. But I didn't really know about the last law hurdle, and no one in school had said, has your paperwork for residential trip been done? No. So I kind of got to national schools with like no paperwork, because you have to have parental consents and you have to have all this kind of stuff. So and then luckily the deputy head at the time sat me down and was like, okay, Ryan, we're going to go through this now at the regatta. And she kind of went through things step by step. And she's like, you're lucky I'm here. And there's a bit of a safety net, but that can't happen again. And then at the end of that year, I messaged the head and said, look, is there, I'm not really sure. Should I be looking for a job in South Africa again? Because I only intended to be at Headington for a year. And it was only a year. That was it. And the head was like, no, you can stay on. So that kind of started my Headington thing. And I must say the school were immensely supportive. And then, I had lots of training and lots of support from school. And Andy, obviously running the program at the time, was great, because I could then focus on the admin and trying to sort out the processes, because culture's downstream from processes. Like, you got to have the processes in place. You have to have the communication in place. And then the culture started falling into place after that. And then there was a point where obviously Andy then left, and then I took on head coach and head of rowing, and then I was also teaching. So it was quite a lot on the plate, but it was a really good time to then find my way as a rowing coach here in the UK.
Without systems, it's almost impossible to juggle these many things in parallel.
No. That's where the spreadsheets and Book of Power came from.
So. Yeah. Oh, maybe it was kind of destined upon you if you wanted to sort of maintain so many different things that you were doing.
Yeah.
How was Headington around the time you started? How were they sort of on the scene in the UK?
Yeah, they were all right. I mean, the club was small, it was 60 odd athletes. So there was a real divide in school from, like, the boat club was really separate from, it didn't even fall under PE or anything. It was like, it was a separate entity. It had a director of sport. So you had a director of sport. So you had a head of PE and you had a director of rowing. So in some ways, even the way the vernacular worked about the systems in school, rowing was put over here, but it wasn't purposefully put over there. It was just how it evolved, because it had come from evolving out of City of Oxford. And then the founders of Hinksey, John Broadhurst and Tom Collins, were the ones who founded the boat club. Their daughters were at Headington. So they were like, well, our friends are going off to other schools and rowing there. Why can't we just have rowing here? So that was the foundations of rowing at the school. And then it was brought into kind of the financial remit of the school. But there were some staff who maybe worked in boarding and then rowing, or in my case, then IT and rowing. And then, but it was small. It was like, they had one twice at the national schools, and that was under Andy Green. So he had a really good group. One group was Katie Greaves group, which I talked about, and like a really driven group, but it didn't have this consistent pipeline of good athletes coming through. So that was the first thing that kind of like what I observed was it was quite fractious with the coaches. The coaches were operating as islands. And I think after 2 years, all those coaches, when I arrived, had kind of like quit. And one of the coaches said, well, if you become head of rowing, I'm done. And I was like, okay.
See you later.
Right. No, it wasn't. I mean, she was a really good coach. I was actually quite gutted to lose her, because actually by the end of that, we had a really good rapport and a really good understanding. And I think it was that communication side. Some people assume things about how you are, and then you start working with them closely, which I did that at the end of that year. And then actually there's a different relationship that formed. And she was great. She was had a really good pastoral side, and the coaching was thorough, but maybe it missed the volume that needed. And then once we started getting that right, actually her crew started doing really well. So you never want to lose someone, you want to work with someone. So that kind of became the foundations of things. And when we started bringing coaches in, I was lucky to get people, who were phenomenal. Like Helen Loughran was an amazing addition that we had culturally for the group. And, with my kind of like, okay, these are the row like this, and these are the kind of like times, and this is, she kind of brought a real softness and kind of thing into it. I was like, oh, okay, that's what we've been missing. And it wasn't necessarily the performance that grew the club. It was the Helen Loughran effect. It was the like, let's have some fun outside on the camps, and let's have team time, and let's have things that the girls would really bond to.
Building culture.
Yeah. And then, Sam Wells, who's now at Moncton, and he worked with Oxford before that. It was great because he had a really good rapport with the girls. He was really chilled, had this kind of like surfer vibe going on, and he was just a lovely human being. And so we had this. The success came from the pipeline of those people who were working there, and then we started getting some success. And so, it's all well and good me saying, "Oh, I'm a great." No, I've been surrounded by great people, and I think that's kind of where I think I stand.
I think there's a skill to facilitating that environment as well. Mm. Obviously, you're not just going to fall in and magically every period and season of your life you're going to have incredible people around. But if this is a recurring pattern in your life, what's the common denominator of all those relationships? Mm. So you got to give yourself some credit.
Yeah. Like I am lucky. Like, working with Chris now. Yeah, I think any place would be mad not to even try Headington. He's phenomenal. Like, I'm really lucky that I've got Chris around. I think give also credit where it's due. Is Headington's success is not just a Ryan Demaine factor. It's a team factor of all the people who I've had the privilege of working with. And I think that's the strength of Headington, is recognizing that and people's part in that. Like, whenever last year I stood in front of the staff body and I was like, okay, cool, this is, the final of Henley, and, cool, nice close race. But actually a massive thank you to all the staff in this auditorium, because you guys were part of this picture. Like, I could not do this without every single one of you teachers, the pastoral team, the whole thing with that happening. That, there is no Headington School Oxford Boat Club without the staff behind it, the pastoral team. We talk about the head and the bursar. They are really important, especially the bursar when you want more yellow boats. All right. He'll hopefully watch this.
Or a boathouse.
Or very nice boathouse. They are really important factors in that, but it is a team factor, and we are so lucky that the sports body supports rowing. And we are a tricky. We're quite demanding. Rowing it's like swimming. You have to do a lot of it to be good. Mm-hmm. But the fact that we're holding such a high academic standard in our rowing group, that's the teachers. That's why you get so many that go to the Ivy Leagues. We had 8 competing 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago at the Ivy League Championships. That's huge.
I saw the photo; it was pretty cool. All the different college all-in-ones and stuff. Yeah,
yeah. And the girls get together and send a team for, not team for. Well, there's a team. It's like the alumni team. It's the Pegasus Boat Club. So we're lucky to have that. But also, let's not underestimate the kind of what the girls bring to it. I think there's a whatever magic dust in the school that permeates this kind of group that really, they turn up every day and they want to work hard. And actually we have to say, look, maybe you should take today off. Actually I'm self-regulating you, so we have to really be on top of that too. But I think as a group, I'm really lucky to work there.
There is some sort of magic that's at Headington. I guess whenever, like over the years, whenever we've come to sort of service the rowing machines, occasionally you guys will come in for like an afternoon session, and there's just music blasting, and there's 24 machines just like going up and down in one rhythm, working towards the same goal. There is something which is really, really good about that atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a really good team atmosphere. I mean, I think, like you said, I think one of the things about becoming successful is understanding you can't do it on your own. It has to be a team effort. I think some people kind of go out and be like, I'm going to prove by myself, and that's you sort of setting yourself up for failure. But yeah, I agree. I think, what was it that Hodgie said about you want your athlete to be asking, you want the coach to be the person saying, no, you need to have a rest now.
Yeah.
Like, that's the ultimate.
Yeah. I mean, like, also, if you ever come observe a session, it's like, people are always surprised. We had Stanford over, and the coach was looking at what's going on. I was in the office, and he looked at the window, kind of, which looks into where the gym is, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'll get ready." I said, "Yeah, let's just go in, let's have a look." And the girls were running the warm up and everything, and he's like, "I've never seen this." And it's like the coaches aren't barking orders, and it's like, "No, the girls run this," and they were like literally doing the whole warm up, and this is normal for us. Yeah. But it's run by the athletes. My job is to coach when I walk around the room, not to bark or stand over their shoulders. And also sometimes it's really important that the coach isn't always over their shoulder. Like, it's actually, in fact, if we talk about how much the coach probably should be over the shoulder, it's probably 10% of the time. Like, you want to be aware of what's going on, but you don't want to be standing over them when they're doing weights. And actually, they've had like 3 tests that day, and they've had this going on, and something's going on at home, and and actually the fact that they're training means that kind of their head is over their feet in that moment, and we don't want to kind of disturb that. And we talk about kind of like anxiety in schools and depression, all this kind of stuff. What's that saying? Depression is thinking about the past, anxiety is thinking about the future, and if you're training, you're in the moment,
the next rep,
and and it's about that rep and about what you want, and actually just enjoying that space. The last thing you need is me as a untrained athlete coming over and going, "I think you can do more." Let them get on with things, and every now and then that might need a gentle nudge. But it's I think it's always important to kind of have a look at what it is. I think people have an opinion that Headington, we train like this. We don't. Like, if you look at our training program, we probably train less than a lot of the teams around us because we don't have capacity in our timetable to train more. So the training time has to be really efficient. It has to be pupil run. So they're the ones who are creating the energy and the environment, and we're facilitators in that.
I love that. I love that. If you were to compare 2 squads, and one is just coach on barking orders, and the other is a system where, like you've just described, which athletes feel like they've got more ownership in the success of the club? The buy-in is a lot higher. The girls will be regulating themselves as well. So then that's a much better sort of autonomy that you give them. And then talk about, obviously it's still a school, so you're trying to prepare them for life after Headington. So that's also giving them a huge amount of, things to, like, responsibilities, learning how to deal with this. And they will have difficult conversations among themselves, or, managing the group from the inside.
I mean, like, if we look at it realistically, so someone is in the 6th form at the moment, rowing in my squad. They'll row for the 2 years at school. Chris and I speak about this all the time, but our metric for success is who continues rowing after school. That's our metric for success. Not junior worlds, not Henley. That's just those are things that happen along the way. And then they'll get the, if they go to a UK university 3 or 4 years, depending on where they go. If it's Edinburgh, it might be 4. And then if they go to the US, then you've got 4 years. After that, our lot, one of the coaches once said to me, "If Headington's so successful, where are all your Olympians?" And I'm like, our guys are going to Ivy Leagues and Oxbridge and that kind of stuff. They are looking at what juggernaut job they're going to do. Yeah. Like, they are really impressive human beings. You sit down with some of our alumni and you're like, "Sorry, you're doing what at the moment?" And they are hugely impressive. We've got, engineers from McLaren. One of the girls posted yesterday and that she's doing work experience with CDs, the F1. And it's like, you guys are so impressive. Like, if I had an ounce on what you were like, the discipline and that kind of stuff when I was your age, it's hugely impressive. So they do need to run things. They do need to do that. And rowing can't be the be all and everything. So the academic side, we always talk about scholar athletes. That's our philosophy, is you have to leave Headington with a really good degree, or say really good, A-levels and that kind of stuff, so you can get into the degree you want to get into, and then you can go on and do medicine and do whatever you want to go do. That is probably the biggest differentiator from our point of view as a school, is that it's not just, are you going to be at the Olympic Games one day? And well, some will go do that. Some will go do that pathway. I was speaking to Jessie Martin when she was in a bit of conundrum post UL going, what am I doing? I'm doing Jessie Martin straight the last 2 under 23 gold medal fours. Not the biggest girl, all right? And she stroked my 8 in 2021. And she's like, I could go do this. I could go do this. I could do this. And I was like, can I throw you a curveball? And she's like, yeah. It's like, how about Cambridge? And she's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. She's now enrolled to Cambridge. She's going to be going to Cambridge. She was on the cusp of the senior squad, literally on the cusp. Give her some time at Cambridge. Paddy, I mean, we know what Paddy will do, and he'll do a really good job. At the time, sorry, Alan, French, but that would have been a discussion early on. But there are some really good places, Oxford and Cambridge. There's some really good coaches. Alan French, Paddy, Paddy Ryan's going to do a really good job with whoever they get, and that will prepare them. But don't get the education right first. Find the environment that will give you both.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I think on face value, you might think, well, just the more we focus on rowing, the better our results will be. And the more we can just keep rowing and everyone will row, and that's the plan. Whereas actually, if you can show that you care about the other reasons why they're at that school and where life goes onwards, I think you in a strange way would get better buy-in, because this is not just someone who wants me to do well so they can put it on their coaching CV as a rower. This is someone who wants to see us be better people. And I think that probably that kind of culture would explain a little bit why. I mean, got that buy-in.
Last year's stroke of the 8 and Henley, she is a music scholar. She's doing 4 A-levels. She's off to Princeton. She rode in the Junior Worlds under 19-8 that won gold last year. That's a person who's got a very busy life and a very full life, and hugely impressive. And she's one of many. You can't just say, oh, I think rowing's gonna take you places. It's not. There are so many people with gold medals and all that kind of stuff. And if we can facilitate their journey, if I get maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people who, go to the Olympic Games, then great. Saw Fiona Gammond yesterday, who went to Tokyo, and she's still rowing. Said, I'm going to quit rowing this year.
She's been saying that for a while.
She's been saying that for every single conversation I've had with her has been that. But it's great to see her still loving rowing, not rowing competitively, but let me rephrase it: not rowing for GB, but loving her rowing wherever she's rowing, and she brings so much to the table for other people to row with. And plus, she's an amazing human being. So I think there's those elements that, we might get one of those gems.
Yeah.
But actually, all of them are gems because they bring something else to society and bring something else to.
Yeah. But the flip side is, hearing stories of, coaches saying, oh, well, I've got labs at 2:00.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but we go rowing at 2:00. So decide, choose what you want to do. It's like, come on. That's
building a program around the coach, not the program on the athlete. And again, we're lucky at the school because pupils will choose their subjects. And I think the philosophy of the school is the timetable then, the teaching timetable about when teachers teach, is built around the students. It's not built around the teachers going, you can choose these slots. So anyone can choose whatever subject they want to do. So that permeates into rowing, that permeates into music and drama and whatever, that things have to fit around the pupils' lives. It can't fit around the staff members' lives, because is it a tail wagging the dog, and actually the school's paying my fees, my salary, shall I say? Yeah,
you've given us so much to think about, even in terms of measuring success. So it's about who continues rowing afterwards, but also who's going to develop a good career, and it's not necessarily about this win at Henley right now, or Nat schools, or the GB selection. And naturally, through that, the amount of pressure that each athlete will feel, it decreases, because the end goal is not victory tomorrow, it's victory in the long run overall. And when did you come up with that entire system? Because obviously I imagine from 2004, it's taken you quite a few years in order to establish the way that you do things, how you organize training, best approaches for athletes, and even things like, it takes a few years to monitor whether a program works with, you can expect performance improvement by that % or that factor. Could you let us into your world a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different metrics in terms of how that would look like. So if we're talking about the philosophy and the culture, that's evolved over time. That's, I'm always reading books on things like, like Clive Woodward's book is a perfect example on how to win. Like, there are culture comes before success, and a shared understanding of what that culture looks like. So when we first start the season, we talk a bit about what our culture is about. Then I get the athletes to sit down and go, what is your culture? You probably see
It's
it
up
in the
on
gym.
the board in the gym. Yeah.
So, basically what are our values, what are our core values, support each other. And then, we want to be successful. And then what does success look like? So, and then I'll have different banding. So they sit down and they define what their culture is going to be for that year. So that's, I might stand up and go, this is a framework that I like to operate in, but ultimately you're the ones in the field. Like if I'm hit by a bus tomorrow, I really hope that you're going to get in the boat and you're going to carry on training. Oh, that's a pity, but this is what Ryan was talking about. And you will still be as successful. If anything, I'd hope they use it fuel for the fire, so there has to be athlete ownership and athlete led. And I think that makes them far more dangerous, because when they're actually in the heat of the moment, they know they're the ones who have created that environment. When it's side by side and it's, tooth and nail, actually, we have to be really mindful that actually we have to develop that talent. So over years and years and years, that culture has to permeate through all the squads. So we'll have everything from that culture that the athletes draw up, but then there's mentoring groups, like we call it little horses groups. The school kind of badge is, has a horse on it. So they'll have, one of the sixth formers, upper sixth formers, will then have a lower sixth former, and then a few 16s and a few 15s, and they will permeate through the squad. It also gives the younger ones an avenue going, I'm too afraid to speak to my coach, but I can speak to this person. And therefore there's a voice that comes through the squad. And also, when we select our captain and vice captain, it's fully democratic. So, Chris and I might have a vote, but it's worth the same as, one of the J15's votes. It doesn't affect, the girls will know who will be a better leader than we will.
Yeah.
And so I think at every level, when we talk about kind of like that organization, that's how it works. And then we can go into the physiology, and then we can go into the technical framework. And, there's so many different elements that we could lean on. Technology we were talking about just before we came in, so yeah.
How many iterations did you go through before you discovered the way that you wanted to run and facilitate long term?
It's always changing. I think that people always go, aren't you bored at Headington? I think, because the nature of society is evolving and things are changing, that actually the athletes make that a really enjoyable process. But, what worked 10 years ago won't work now. I think they'll always, I can say it now because, this will probably come out after Henley, or whenever, but I always say, the 2017 crew, they were great. Actually, the fact of the matter is they've had lots of great crews after that. I lean on that group because they're such a good close cohort of friends even today. But actually, like right now, you look at our first eight, they would dwarf anything that 2017 ever did. They are sensational athletes, and also really impressive academically. So there is that culture that 2017 created that's been passed down.
Built on top of, yeah.
So actually, every year group, I always say, leave the club in a better state than you arrived at it. Like that's on you. The culture and the values that this club and the way you train, you're passing on to the next age group. So how do we discover it? It's just evolved, I think, and it's continuously evolving.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the physiology, and I think this is one interesting thing because we've had a conversation about this before. Again, at the start of this, before we were talking about how women's programs quite often just follows men programs. And I think, I'm not sure when you started doing it, but probably you might have been one of the first schools to be doing lactate testing. And on the back of that, you kind of worked out a different way that for the suited the physiology of women. I'd love you to talk about how that went down.
So there's that Australian protocol, the step test, and you basically, have 6 4-minute pieces, and you run through the iterations of that and progressively harder. And we found that where that landed was completely wrong. And every time we tested it, if we did a week apart, just to kind of see if we're getting different results, we got completely different results. So we talked about, we worked with Dr. Charlie Simpson over at Brooks.
His book's behind you, yeah.
Yeah. And he's, if you talk about a fountain of knowledge, he's the oracle when it comes to all things kind of sports science. And we kept finding that, like sometimes we get a marker and you'd be like, well, that split, or that what is what their half-hour PB is. And I think there's been this view, because the research has been done wholeheartedly on men's programs because they wanted something consistent and stuff. We've really done women a disservice. So very early on, I sat down with Charlie and I was like, can we start talking about this? Can we start talking about this? And Charlie and I, we met on the towpath one day and hit it off. And then almost every single year we had a project running through Brooks that was using our athletes as kind of the test subjects, obviously with all the consents and all that kind of stuff. And there'll be an MSc project and we're looking at our athletes as a case study. And over time, we built this knowledge base of actually, if we change our protocol to more an endurance-based protocol, and we did sampling through that, we'd get far more accurate values. And then our protocol now is, rather than testing every X amount of stages, we now test a bit more kind of with a bit more spacing. And there'll be points where like, okay, no, you're done with the test now. And we'll retest you because actually you haven't got this right. And so it evolves. So it's really athlete specific. So rather than just saying, get on the ergo and all of you need to sit on this, we find this Goldilocks zone of where the ideal training zone is, and we can throw volume at that. And we space out the volume by swimming, by getting on the bike, by getting on the erg, by using heart rates, by using everything available to us. So whether it's on the water or on land. And what we found is that, when we found our top end ergo kind of averages were, I don't know, like, if we go back, say 15 odd years, probably around the 740, high 740s, and you had occasionally these like absolute specimens that would be like 710-ish. You always get that. But actually what we've got now is the bulk of our crew down there, because we're everyone in my first eight is one under the GB cutoff for final crew formation. In fact, I'd say that and my quad. In fact, most of our second eight is below that. So we have people in our second eight trialing for GB because, they've hit those scores. But that hasn't been flogging. That's been pulling back the program, doing less mileage. I think most people are surprised when I say, yeah, we go out for 10K sessions. We go, but what about the 18K? It's like, yes, sometimes we do that. Remember the 8s and stuff. But actually, it's about the quality of the session and not just throwing miles or junk miles at them. And then also it's mirroring that in the gym. So like, can we treat the gym as a UT2 session? So we don't lose a session of UT2, because we've only got a finite number of sessions. So, and that's quite difficult because you're trying to do strength weights and you're trying to give recovery. So we have to balance that out. So that program has evolved. We had a guy called Barry John Mulder. You probably know him.
Yeah.
And he was great in terms of his interactions with us and his input around the 2016, 2017 group, 2018. So that's had to evolve in terms of the physiology. The hard thing is athletes need to take ownership of that. So when we send them out and they're in a single by themselves going, it's very easy to say, no one's looking,
Mm-hmm.
but that's on them. So I don't track heart rates anymore and go, oh, you weren't on your heart rate today. That's on them. At the end of the day, we'll trial the boats, we'll race them, we'll see what the best fit is. And then their water speed will be the indicator of, so the top 8 ergos aren't in the first 8 at the moment. But the top 8 boat movers are in the first 8 at the moment.
That must have also had an effect on injury and illness.
We found we had fewer injuries, far fewer injuries. And illness is a funny thing because you'll have a year where just lots of people over December, January, February just get ill.
Yeah.
I think more and more I'm seeing that people get ill quite a lot. And I don't know if that's maybe our lifestyle or central, buildings have more central kind of ventilation. And so you kind of breathing the same air a lot more, windows aren't opening. So, I think it's difficult to say. We found that our injury rates are a bit lower and our illness rates are a bit better. It's also better when the girls say, I feel like I'm getting ill and my heart rate's up by 10 beats or 20 beats. I'm not going to be there this afternoon, or my throats are particularly, we're like, okay, stay away. And like this, particularly other athletes, you can have a few days off. it's quite difficult with parents because they go, well, hang on, we've rowing is like, they've got an afternoon activity and I've got work. It's like, well, I can't have an ill person around. It's just going to spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
It will anyway in school, but if we can minimize that within our squad, then great. But it's also knowing that if a lot of the squad are ill and the program says X, like I never do the training program more than 3 or 4 days in advance. Only this Henley period do I have the template. But like last night, we didn't follow the template. We did something else because that's what the crew needed. So it's not going, the program is the program. It's going, what is, the athletes aren't robots. So can I will see the stimulus they'll need. I've had enough experience to kind of go, actually, we can press a bit harder today. We need to back off. We can do something consistent today. And also for the athletes to go, I don't have to follow this to the letter. I can still be successful without having to do, the half-hour ergo test and another one and this and that, the next thing, and they row themselves into the ground.
Yeah, it's teaching athletes to listen to their body and like you said, be adult, exactly what Pete said. Like as soon as you treat someone like an adult, they start acting like an adult. And exactly all of the things that you're saying are just showing like how they'd be able to step up and be capable of handling all of that themselves, which then leaves you free to do things like lactic testing and getting into the data, and it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah.
So every 4 days you come up with sessions, which you do, or you have like a bank of them that you use?
No, I'm generally, we've got our bog standard sessions, our kind of like Goldilocks sessions. Those are the ones that we'll know elicits good responses at certain times of the year. And, kind of early season will look quite different to mid-season, which look quite different to the latter part of the season. Remember, the aerobic system can inhibit the anaerobic system if you're drumming that too hard, but you still need to do the aerobic stuff. So there is a fine balance in terms of how the boat's moving and how they're looking. Likewise, is also having the foresight to kind of go, that 8 is starting to move really quick and I don't want it to move quick now. So we'll break it down. So there are times where I'll just pull the 8s into other boats, into small boats in pairs and go, okay, because I made the mistake, and years ago, I was one of the coaches who we used to kind of coach against, and he looked at my crew. He's like, if you had a race the time when national schools should have been, because national schools was moved like a week later, you would have beaten us, but you peaked too early, technically. And I was like, and then we were like running that edge, the back end of that edge, whereas he was just coming into his and maybe hadn't quite timed it right for national school, but he hit it that week. So there is that technical peak too, where you can row the 8 too much.
That's an interesting. A lot of people talk about peaking too early. Like, what is that? How do you explain that in your head? Like, some people be like, okay, well, the earlier you find speed, the better, right? And then we'll just be faster for longer.
Yeah, but a crew will always, this is a psychological part of it, is a crew will always go look for more. Like, it felt amazing here. Now I'm going to try work for more. And actually, what you're doing there are really fast times. If you break it down a bit, you'll probably be faster. You'll probably hear and you're trying to look for more, but the way to actually get more is maybe take a step back. And that's where the small boats, I think a lot of people really go wrong, is they don't row. Like at Henley, the amount of times that, okay, we're racing this afternoon, but it's quite busy, so we're going to row single sculls as our pre-race row, and we'll go out and we'll row the single. And then we'll come back in and then do our race warm up in the 8 and then go do that. And that was actually Tom Jost. Josty was like, hey, you can do that. So you learn from great people around you. Like, we're lucky in the UK that you've got people like Tom Jost, who's, I'd say, one of the best sculling coaches in the country. You're Mark Wilkinson, who obviously has that pedigree behind him. And you learn from all these guys. Bobby, you sit down and have a coffee with Bobby, and slowly things might come out and you think, oh, I do that and that works. And so I would, if I was back to when I first started, I'd find the best coaches and literally go buy them a coffee and say, look, can we just talk rowing?
That was also Tom Jost's advice.
Yeah.
That's why he went over to Australia and just was like, can I come and sit in a boat? And obviously and you find out, I think you would assume, the stakes are very high. There's a lot of schools putting a lot of time and effort into trying to be the best and beat each other. but actually behind the scenes, everyone is fairly collaborative. And sure, you're not going to be sharing every single detail, but I think it's really nice to see in the scene that people are super happy to have someone, come on, jump in, have a look, let's have a chat.
Yeah.
So I don't understand rowing or physiology to the point where I could necessarily create a program and then figure out when the peak is. What are some of the signs of like a peak speed where you're like, okay, I need to back off now, without sharing too much?
I'm happy to share that. I mean, because I think it's I can't remember who the coach was. It was the Yale men's coach who said keep them fresh. I've forgotten what his name is, but
Steve Gladstone.
Steve Gladstone, he was like, keep them fresh. And there is an element of that. Like, we do need to work people, but we also need to back off. So I think you only have an evolution in someone's physiology if you are brave enough to take a step back. Doesn't mean rest, but it does mean pull back on the program. So when we start the season, whenever we start the season, we will the nature of girls' schools is you have a fluctuation of change. So people will move schools. So we get between 4 and 6 new girls every, year that come to Headington from different backgrounds, and you don't know what they've done. So regardless of, there'll be girls who have trained over the whole holiday, and I'll be like, okay, cool. You're going out for 2K down and 2K back. And they're like, I can see them getting agitated. But what you're doing is you pull everyone onto the same kind of, I'm assuming that you haven't sculled, so let's not get injured in our first few sessions. And then very slowly, we talk about that 10% rules. We build the program up so that by November time, we're starting to build the volume in. So we're not in a rush early doors. The problem is, this comes in kind of the nature of wanting to select talent or trained physiology is sometimes I feel that 2K at rate 24 comes quite early. But what you're going to capture is the big strong girls. All right. So, the bar is low enough on that ergo for people to, if they're going to be big hitters with my GB hats on, they're going to get that ergo quite comfortably. Then we start building volume into it. And then by kind of November, December, January, February, we're barely got any speed. There's no speed in our program. Like we don't train speed. It's just, if they can sit at 28, 30 and have row and sink, then, sometimes they'll set at 32. I think they had a Charles, they managed to set at that this past year, but we didn't try look for that. We looked for like rhythm and ratio and impulse. And so if you could find that kind of that base endurance at that point, then you can start stacking speed after that. So from April onwards, we start stacking speed. And then that means that we start dropping down the endurance stuff, but then start really pushing kind of, the UT1, the threshold stuff, and a bit more tempo work. But even that, like, we've got Henley Women's this weekend. We haven't done any 1500s or really anything hard, like sustained stuff yet, because we're trying to get the base rates, the 25s, the 27s, the 29s, kind of like really well before we try and look at finding speed. So I think it's crew dependent and coach dependent. Some Mark Wilkinson works from the front end. I work from the back end. Like, there's many ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And it's not who's right or who's wrong, but we all have our methodology and reason why we do things. It's not to say that my way works. It works with Headington. Now, if I was on a different timetable school like St. Albans in South Africa, they had to do different things because our day was very different. And I think if someone applied the Headington program to another school, I think they might make a mistake. We've seen coaches go do that. They go to somewhere else, they go, this is what Headington does. You're going to do that, and it just falls apart.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a right way or wrong way. Mm-hmm. It's finding what works and then taking really good ideas and logging them and writing them down and having spreadsheets. Really annoys me when I speak to coaches and go, how do you know they're the best? No, I like how they run. It's like, no, that's give me something more. Like trajectory for me is really important. So we look at ergos and we kind of go, this is their trajectory. Let's start facilitating them with some really good rowers. And then let's help that trajectory go on the water. Rather than just say, okay, big ergos, let's throw them in the boat. Like, you hear that a lot from some of the American crews, big ergos, and we've raced crews at Henley that have 7 minutes, 7:04 average ergos. We're not even close. Yet our guys can handle themselves technically because they can row that impulse really well. And that average ergo, whatever it might be, will be translated to the water, whereas that 7-odd minute ergo might be translated to a 7:20, 7:25. Who knows, because of technical issues.
Effectively,
Interesting.
yeah, it's effectively like taking the time to build a house without using hollow bricks, because you need to put something together very quickly. And if you can afford that period in the season of the 10 months of prep, then that will definitely pay off by just sort of holding back and then still continuing in that direction. I mean, it's true from my personal experience as an athlete that just being down at Leander, that you don't need to do a huge amount of speed work in order to be fast in the summer. And we broke down a lot into small boats over the winter, and then technique was a very common theme. Like 8K tech session, to a lot of people that's a throwaway session, but you can still make so much improvement out of that. And then by the time we actually came to race season, I used to get such bad pre-race nerves before I came to England, and then since I was here, I just knew just how hard we trained and the quality of the work that we've done. So many different exercises, late feathering, double squaring, all of those things. You sit at a start line and you're just like, okay, it's not a matter of if we row well, we just knew that we trained so hard we would get a good row. So obviously you're talking about coupling both physiology and technique versus I think maybe there is programs there which don't do that. They either focus on one or the other. We don't row the best, but we're really strong and we're really fit. So that's how we get our speed. And then some people will pride themselves by having the best looking crews, but actually those top end watts are missing.
Yeah. I think also just it comes back to the athlete's ownership of it. Like they have to own the drills, they have to own everything. That's that's why, like, I mentioned earlier, but we got we were chatting outside. We got Expert and Peach. What I really liked about Expert is it was athlete centric. So the athletes suddenly had all the data in front of them. You could walk into the boathouse with the information, and then suddenly it's uploaded to the cloud. They can get on their phone and they could review their data straight away. It wasn't like this. We've got all the Peach data on the coach's computer, and we're going to keep that away. We've moved back to Peach in our build up towards Henley because there's certain metrics that I use, and but like last night, put it on to the girls now know what to look for the charts, and if you just took the charts, sent it to them on Spot and said, we'll chat about it as our pre-session briefing will be what happened at last session. And we'll look at the data there. So it's fresh in our minds for this. So there's a lot of means by which we can exploit technology or the athlete's knowledge or, coaches around us. And in this Thames region, we are so lucky. We've got the best brains in the rowing world, all in this region. I can literally go down to each boathouse and go, man, that's incredible. I want to use some of that, or I want to use some of that. And I don't want to use everything because it won't work, but those elements I could probably steal.
Do you as a coach focus on separating the roles within your team? So some coaches are technique centric, or do you have sort of jack of all trades?
No, everyone needs to know everything. Like I'd say the first thing a coach needs to do is have the pastoral welfare, human elements. Like if you don't have that human interaction, I'm not interested. That is the most important element in any boathouse. So when we interview people, I don't care how much you know, I care how much you care. That's going to be the benchmark. And then on that, I expect all my coaches to learn how to rig, how to do laterals, pitches, spans, and know the ins and outs of that. And if they don't know how to do it, we will show them. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, come see what Chris is doing, come see what I'm doing, like jump in the launches. And then not to say that we're doing it the right way, but I don't want them to be mirrors of me. I want them to be their own coach because they'll bring a really good skill set into that. I look at someone like Tom Springbed, who's one of our youngest coaches. who's working with our 16s at the moment. He's got an amazing rapport with the athletes, partly because obviously he's quite young and stuff, and he's an ex-Headington boy, and he's really articulate. He should be in the city earning the big money, but anyway, but what we actually see is that he's developing his own style, but he's got that foundation. The most important foundation is the human side, and therefore he'll have athletes to carry on coaching.
It's not about hoarding the knowledge, it's about bringing everyone else around you, because if you are at the sum of your environment, then by elevating the knowledge level and the skill set in your environment, naturally you just push forward. I mean, we spoke with Matt Britton last summer about sort of inducing high performance culture in teams, and everything that you've been describing kind of like fits perfectly into that mold. Culture of collaboration, bringing lots of different opinions and an ownership and things like that. That's just incredible.
Yeah, I think I might have said Tom Springbeck rather than Tom Symington, and Tom Symington is the coach. So yeah, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, we're a school. We're not a high performance program. We try to be. You know, our girls row for 2 hours. Our contact time is 2 hours. The training time is 90 minutes each day. We're far from high performance, but if we can serve them really well, like if you imagine like one of our top physics teachers or one of our top biology teachers or whatever in the school, and the way they would lay out like their articulation in a classroom and how they deliver that side of things, we need to equally be as skilled in terms of how we deliver that. So yeah,
I mean, just looking at Headington rowing every year, been quite privileged to be able to see you guys through the behind the scenes on the Henley commentary. Some of the best, well put together crews. Where did you find what rowing should look like in your view? Did you get inspired by some of the Aussie crews, British crews, or was it kind of a process of trial and error? This is how I like it.
I think the elements of everything that I like. There's been some Aussie crews that have looked great, you know, and had amazing rhythm and feel and relaxation. So our premise is like always, you know, first there's relaxation, rhythm, and then efficiency. You know, you can have crews that maybe aren't so efficient, but they have a really good rhythm and they've got really good kind of like they're relaxed, they're loose, and then the kind of like how the legs push and how the hips open and how the arms deliver. And then you look at some of the British crews and, you know, and you kind of go, oh, that's really good. So I'll take some of that. And I wouldn't say it's been one specific thing. Like these things I like the Dutch crew of 96, the Renegade crew where, you know, they're all scullers who came over. So we've taken a lot of that. Like we scull so much. Everyone kind of looks at us and goes, oh, you're a sweep school. No, I'd say we're a sculling school that sweep. So yeah, I think there's elements that we've taken that have been really profound and good, but I wouldn't say there's any one thing. In terms of coaches, love the stuff Harry Mann did. He came out to South Africa and did some work with crews out there when I was younger. And there were coaches, some really good coaches who fed off that, you know. I mentioned Terma Christian was another one, John Gehring, you know. So they were kind of my coaches, and we learned a lot about that. I remember famously there was a kid who rowed really well who was in the four, and everyone thought, man, he's the next Olympian, and that's what he had been told. And we were rowing along, and Harry Mann came up and was like, I'm happy to coach this crew, but as long as I can teach him to row. Basically saying he didn't know what he was doing. And back then it was like, you know, legs and hips all at the same time, you know, and then you had the classic nav going on. But there were elements of that throughout kind of growing up through school and through university, which you pick up. And, you know, I wouldn't say even what I do is necessarily, I think probably some coaches who will look at us and go, oh, we don't like that top down. We don't like this. There's reasons why I get crews to do that, because it helps things later on. But is it right? I hope so.
I mean, you can look at the Polish quad from Beijing, and their rowing style is certainly very unique, but it works for them. But then there's also that big Canadian back end from 2008 as well. Yeah. And then, but that might inspire some more injuries and things like that. No, it's good to see that you can sort of look at different avenues and bring them together. And you don't need to follow like a specific mold, but you can just make one that fits for you. And that's really good.
A few years ago, we raced a US crew that just kind of came down the track that was rating way higher than us. And we like, you learn the most from your losses, and we pulled that apart, like everything, kind of how they were rigged up, how we were rigged up, and we kind of came to the conclusion, like, maybe we got that wrong. And that basically redefined everything kind of moving forward about how we set boats up. And so you'll learn things while you're doing things too. Like, remember, I spent my first few years with Headington losing pretty much everything, and then actually LEH were the fastest crew then. So I said to the head coach then, I was like, we'll take X amount of boats on our trailer to the Armada Cup. You can put X amount of your boats on the trailer to the Armada Cup. We'll go do a camp together. You don't all you need to do is pay for your flights and your accommodation. We'll take the transport hit. And our girls suddenly realized, one, they're human, and two, suddenly actually our group just had this jump in kind of performance because they're rowing with people rowing against people who are better than them on a training camp and in training environment. So you always pick up things, and sometimes it's, there are little niches like that you can gravitate towards.
You say that, but you've got to be willing to change, and you've got to be willing to say, I got it wrong, and make things change. A lot of people are like, no, this is the span we use. This is no, we've always done it this way. And like it can be a difficult one to slip into, especially if you've had success with that. But the ability to just come back every year and go, right, we can change that, change that. That's a skill as well that I think from listening to you, you're pretty good at.
I hate it because you want your crews to do well. You really have this. You hold them in such high regard that when they lose, you kind of you carry that yourself, and you're like they've worked so hard this year. Did I serve them in the way I should have? And so there are times Chris and I will literally spend the whole summer holiday going, like, let's go back over what we did, where did it go wrong? And actually, they were really talented athletes. They were, we know they had X, in their favor. We know we had X amount going to GB, and where did we find what happened? We'll put it apart. And but I don't think people should be afraid of that. It's kind of like, we talked about that fall last year, where you've got to be willing to kind of pull things apart and try get the most out of group. That's the coach's job, and not to kind of. I hate when people go, "Oh, your crew wasn't good at the end." No, I wasn't. It's not. Don't ever blame my crew. Like, that's not on them. That's on me. Yeah. So yeah,
ownership as well. Yeah. So that American crew the US crew that you're talking about, that's obviously, if I'm thinking correctly, I think that's a sort of a mix of all the different top schools in the US putting together a crew and then sending them over to Henley.
That was a school. I can't remember which school it was.
It wasn't Row America Rye.
No, it wasn't Row America Rye. No.
Okay.
We raced them 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In the final. They had been national champions over there, but that was an interesting one because we raced the Australian national champions, and then obviously we raced the US national champions, and then on the other side of the draw, Hinksey had won the national schools there, and then, but so yeah, it was, and then also you had that the kind of storm that came through, and the water was just pumping down the course, so we really had to look at that and how we gear, and most people like lightening up. We were stiffening our blades up into the stream, and it sounds counterintuitive, but Wilkie and I always talk about that. It's like, actually, that's where people tend to go wrong. So I think my crew had a really good kind of buzz and energy and vibe. I think the commentator says, the loud and noise from the Americans contrasted with the quiet British crew, and it was my guys who were like, yeah, let's go. So I think it depends on the crew. Like, this crew's not a vocal crew. That crew was. So yeah, I think kind of the US crew is always going to be interesting because they can pull from things, and then that's just people. The stewards like to say, no, we're monitoring that, and the crew that came over from Australia last year was basically just all composites. They'd all rode for other places. At the end of the day, we have to race the fastest crews in the world, and there's no sense complaining about it. If there's one thing I've learned is that there are crews that are doing some really good stuff, and have lots of scholarship money available, but they have to work hard to get those athletes into the culture. And it's not easy for those coaches. Everyone goes, oh, they're the finished product. There are things that you have to navigate when you get new pupils. But yeah, they are talented, and I think any coach would like to take talented athletes. But for us, we just know we have to race Row America Rye or Newport to Kaitaku were fast that year too, or one of the Aussie national champions, and we raced for years in the quad, coming off second best to Hartbury and all that kind of stuff, Gloucester Hartbury. No one listened to us. We were like, oh, they may have swapped an athlete from whatever. It doesn't matter. Their name's on the trophy. No one cares about the backstory. There's no sense crying about it. You got to create a better environment that creates faster athletes. And we're not always going to win. Every time we look at next year and we kind of go, okay, it's going to be tough. And we just got to make good with the athletes that we have, because they are awesome human beings. That's because that's who I've got, and they're putting up with me. So they must be quite patient.
Yeah, we're into Henley now, so let's keep talking about it. I think it's interesting that you said you're sort of a sculling school that rose. People will be forgiven for seeing the success you've had in the last 5 years and feel like that must come from, like a program that's been around 10, 15, 20 years. But the event was only made 5 years ago. I think some people might be like, oh, like you said, Headington, of course they're going to do it. Of course they've got a fast 8. But for that time before that event was out, you would say that quad was always the focus? Did you do a lot of it throwing? Or?
We still did the 8. We still did the 8 at national schools. And it was great then. I loved it then, because at national schools, you could do the 8, you could do the quad. So it was a championship event. You knew the best people from all around the country were doing either, they do the 8 and then they do the quad, or break into Cox's 4 or whatever. I think it's a shame that national schools has gone to a point where it's a bit more participatory. Like you have championship events where that the top athletes aren't going to be rowing that. So yeah, there might be a really good pair, but you don't have all the good pairs from, maybe there might be, I might take someone from the 8 and row the champ pair. It might be my best pair. And then I might take a quad and row that. And then I might have the other 2 might be J16s rowing the J16 pair. I really think that's been a pity that we've lost that. And I think the event has suffered as a kudos event. I can race Met the following weekend, and now I'm going to be racing against Leander 1, Leander 2, Thames 1, Thames 2, Thames 3, whatever the case may be. And actually, the last time we raced it, had the AB, we were in the C final, Shiploke in the B final, but we know we could. There's some like caliber racing. So like I think when we look at, say, kind of has Headington always been a sculling school or whatever, we focused on both, which I think was really was special about what we did, is we knew we could put out a top quad that could make the weekend of Henley Royal. I think before the 8 came in, I think we had made more semi-finals and finals than any other club or school, at the Royal. In fact, we had qualified for every single Henley. I think that at the time couldn't be said for any other club or school. So, yeah, we were consistent players. Maybe not the top, but we were consistent. And I think, I'd hope to think that we are consistent. People, often say, kind of look at us and go, okay, we're a benchmark. But I think it's because we're consistent. But there are great crews, like, Teddy's had a sensational national schools. They've done well. They've got Tash coaching them, and Adam Moffat as the head of rowing. They are good at what they do. And you've got to give respect to Dave and Dave Curry and Dan Safdari. They are great coaches, and they run a good program. And and you look all around the place, and Henley have a great program and always have. So, you just look at Marlow, what they're doing at the moment. Chambers is doing a great job there. So, who's the best or who's the best program? I think it fluctuates, and it should fluctuate.
People push each other up.
Yeah.
Because in the same way that Brooks has really revolutionized with their 13 wins across 2 years, it made other people like really need to go in and chase them. And I think you've probably induced that same sort of sense in your competition.
Yeah. There are good people around, and I'm not going to, I'm not too proud to kind of turn around and say, there's some really impressive coaches in the UK, and it makes me a better coach. Keeps me on my toes, because complacency can set in. And you look at every Henley Royal that we've won, we've lost national schools. So
peak too early.
that was not about peaking necessarily. I think people, it's just when you find speed, and also I think who knows? Yeah, you're only as kind of good as your last performance, really. And actually, as soon as that performance is, what did they say? Kind of, you only hold the trophy in that moment, but you've had it all year. You just didn't know you had it. So at Henley Royal, you might have it on that day, and you've got a chaperone / bouncer / steward who's like watching you like a hawk with that trophy. And there's photos going on, but actually you've probably had it since September because of how you trained all year long. And then you hold it and you put it down, and then that's it. It gets handed to the next year, because the cycle then changes. So you go into the 2027 season, and there are people who hold the trophy but just don't know it yet.
I love that.
So
I love that philosophy.
Yeah.
There was you mentioned before about the ownership you give the girls being a big part of why you think that maybe when races get close, they have an advantage. I think Henley last year was a bit of a dogfight, the final.
Oh yes, yeah.
And the year before was pretty close as well, or not?
Yeah, I mean, the year before was Row America Rye. The hard one was Newport.
Right.
The hard one was definitely Newport, because but I just think every now and then you have like one of those races that it just really clicks. It doesn't just click; it just absolutely everything happens. And that Row America Rye race was one of those. On paper they were the favourites by a long shot, and it's you look at the urge, you look at the caliber of the crew. They were really impressive that year. But I think like my guys were up for it. They, so and I had said to them in the briefing, Row America Rye are so fast at the start. Like my crew had come out the start and were half a length to a length down every single race that season, and then suddenly have the perfect start and like a length up by the barrier. Yeah, okay, this is interesting. This is not how it was meant to happen, because we didn't think that would happen. But you had a really good coxswain in the boat that year who could adapt the race plan and suddenly change things. And because actually we thought we'd have to row that strategically differently. I think also what people forget is Henley is a really strategic course, and there are points on the course where you have to capitalize on the advantages it gives you. And if you don't, or if you ignore them, you're going to come undone. And over the years, like my first Henley with the girls, I was completely like, that quota, we had no idea what was going on. And every year we learn from what the water's doing and what the conditions are doing, what the wind's doing, because there are without a doubt, it's match racing is very different to 6-lane racing. You operate very differently on that track to how you would operate in 6-lane racing.
Yeah. It's that's the thing. That's the special thing about Henley, isn't it? It's something when I was rowing that we really struggled with when you came up against American crews that had been doing that matched style racing throughout the whole year. Meanwhile, it's great to do Dorney and have 6-lane racing, but it's just so very different. And that sort of dogged fight and ability to trust yourself in that moment. Like we maybe came on the wrong side of that a few times, but fair play to them for having a system. And I think because of that, there's a lot more match fixture stuff now that goes on through the year in the UK and stuff to try and replicate that uniqueness of Henley. But yeah, so really exciting. Obviously, again, so won the first time round, then lucky enough to win 24 and 25, so defended a title. That's a difficult thing, a different aspect, going from trying to win something to then trying to maintain or hold it, especially when obviously now you've got the mark of the crosshairs on your back, as it were.
Yeah.
Did you approach that season differently, or is it just always that, process, not outcome sort of?
It's always process.
Yeah.
Like, the moment you kind of start looking at what the if you're going to win, then you're done. It's one stroke at a time, and come down the track and just make sure you're rowing it well, and you're on the front edge and you're on the back edge of the spoon, and you know what you're looking for down the track, and I think the moment you kind of shift into am I going to win, then you're done. I'm
not trying to win Henley. I'm trying to row as long and smooth, as relaxed as I can for this stroke.
Yeah,
easy to say, hard to do, but that's it.
So I mean, like last year was really well matched down the track. We'd lost quite considerably to Shiplake in the previous two side by side races that we had done against them, and we didn't meet them at Henley Women's, but then at the Royal we knew they would be very fast, and all credit to them, they gave a fantastic run down the track, and both crews went under the previous record. So it's not often where you have that kind of level of racing. And it's what a privilege for those girls to be in that kind of thing, because people were concerned about we're going to add a women's event that's going to be a non-event, and it's been anything but that. There've been some really hard, tough races. I'd really argue that actually some of them have been far more exciting than the boys' races because of just how close they've been. And you got this thing, this anomaly with the US universities, that we've got so many of our athletes going over to the US now that it's driven women's rowing here in the UK, that it's actually really pushed that. And it's not so much for the boys as it is. Yeah, it's good opportunities to get into good universities over there, but not to the extent that you have on the women's side. On the women's side, you just got like this, if I have 15 to 20 universities visiting Headington over the course of the year, trying to recruit, and that's the norm.
Wow.
We'll have people in back November, December, January, February. Like our timetable was pretty. Like this year, I was like, sorry, we're going to have this coach and this coach. I know you're from competing programs, but that's the only way we could fit you in. We've got to a point where we don't really allow like the whole talk time anymore. It's just if you want to speak to any of these coaches, here they are, and we'll wait behind for them after the training session. So that's driven women's rowing massively, and I'm sure that's the case with clubs and schools all over the UK. Where if you want to recruit from anywhere internationally, the UK is the place to be. I've had phone calls with people from South Africa going, I'm looking at coming to the UK and to row, and it's interesting. Like Lauren Carey, for example, when she arrived as a junior, someone had given me my phone number and said, look, I'm going to be rowing at York. What do I need to do to get on the trials process? And I explained it to her and all that kind of stuff. And next thing we know, she's going to Yale. Next thing we know, she's in her 23. Next thing we know, she's a senior squad rower. This is the place to be anywhere internationally if you really want to take your rowing the distance, because of the expertise, because of what's around. I'm a very small fraction of what that's about, and there's this huge community around it. I think people don't recognize that often.
Yeah. Well, that's segued, because I did definitely want to bring up the fact that you've been part of that as well in the junior GB system, I think since 2006. So again, alongside everything that you've just told us that you've been doing with Headington, you've been doing all of this as well, and also putting a lot of work into the data and the background in those kind of things. And I think it must be said that a lot of that is seeing the success through under 23s and coming up into seniors was built, from that time period. And I think up to that time period, like, there've been wins and before, but now the sort of consistent success amongst the under 23 team on the women's side and the men's side. It's got to be a big part of.
Yeah, I think kind of which way comes first, chicken or the egg. So it's kind of like, if we look at it now, we've got the Royal adding a lot of events, and it's like you got the best events anywhere in the world, adding key events that will support British rowing and actually also international rowing. So, if I was an international coach, I would be like, I'm taking crews every single year to Henley Royal. We might get knocked out in an early stage, but just being part of that spectacle is hugely impressive. I was speaking to James Thompson, who I coached when he was 15 and 16 or whatever. And he rode in the 4 in London for South Africa. And he was like, Ryan, the London Olympics was here. Henley every single year is here. And Rio is here. And he kind of like went through it like, that actually Henley has that kind of gravitas and kudos. That the only time that he's ever experienced anything better was London. Mm-hmm. Because we have a rowing community and this, I mean that, I don't know what they called it, but it was this cacophony of noise in that last 500. Mm-hmm. And actually they could hear it from the start when, the roll call was being done. Wow. So, there is that mass support. And then we see that at Henley, nowhere, anywhere in junior rowing, anywhere in the world where you have a crowd like that supporting your race. And the way they've positioned some of the races, particularly some of the junior events, in recent years, quite often it's been around lunchtime, and you've just had this crowd down the track, and it's done wonders for junior rowing, and then into the universities and the retention now, and university rowing, the fact they can do the quads and the 8s on both sides, and then into the under 23 system, and then into the senior program. So when I talk about my athletes in kind of rowing and kind of, I'm not looking at producing Olympians, I'm looking at producing people who go to university. That's for them to then row at under 23 level. And then it's their job to get them to the next level, which is the senior level. So I think that's starting to have traction. I'm seeing girls rowing for longer at university now because of Henley. So coming back to there's some phenomenal athletes back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10 when I was kind of working there, and then the quad came in, and we kind of lost that sweep impetus, in terms of the success, because the scullers that became the foundation. So we started getting regular medals then, but a lot of B finals from the sweep team. And then when I came back into it, when Shep asked me kind of around 2022 to kind of be discipline lead for the under 19 junior women sweep team, the focus was, can we get a medal now in that team? And actually we had an A final and a medal. The 8 got a silver then. And then the following year, Chip asked me to kind of like oversee the 4 and the 8. So we had Bodo with the 8, phenomenal coach in himself, and Helen with the 4, and again, another phenomenal coach. And so that's how I kind of oversaw it, but actually they were really good, capable coaches who, by their own right, coached a phenomenal program and took a 4 that got silver, such a close race. And Helen did really well with them, and Bodo with that sensational gold, which was like hundredths of a second, that blanket finish of the 8s. So that was really nice to be part of, and kind of to witness. And then we've started seeing more and more medals, and actually, to the point where in Canada we had a pair of 4 and 8s, which all made the final. And that's a huge success. So we'll see where that takes us. I think Henley has a large part to play in that, and I think also the new structure with having your discipline leads means that there's a lot of focus and a lot of communication.
What is that, a discipline lead? So in reality,
so basically, my job is to run the trial for that trials process, and do the swaps and so forth. It can be a bit tricky because obviously I would Headington girls there, so I have an independent. So in the past, in recent years, been Mike Martin. He'll turn around. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to do the swap of this one. He's like, no, swap so and so and so and so. No, that'll be the Headington swap. And he will call it. I won't even, I'm in the vehicle with him, and it will come out of, he's like, we're going to check that now. We're going to check that now. So that's what the independent person's job is to do, is to make sure that actually it's held to task. This year we brought in Andy Green as someone who supports me with that. And then on top of that, you got Vicky and you got Mike as independent selectors. But then you've also got, your discipline leads of the other disciplines who will look over and go, oh, hang on, what about so we've got a big whiteboard in the war room, and on that whiteboard we'll have who's doing what and where we should check. So we were basically kind of like fielding questions from them who were like, why don't you check this? What are you going to check this? And so we start running through that. I think that's made for a really strong and tight-knit kind of selection panel, to the point where we no longer need to kind of actively go out and have regular, every single day we'd have meetings with coaches, which could pull you off that path. Whereas you've got a room full of people with a GB hat on going, we want to produce the best GB junior team in the world, like the best junior world's team in the world. How are we going to do that? And with the people we have, and it's they do hold you to task. So it's a really good environment.
It's clearly working.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, you know, I think that process, well, I think people could always pick fault with things when they watch externally. Everyone's a professional when they're watching someone over there. And it's you know, we're hopefully doing the athletes a really good service and the coaches a really good service by providing a good trials process. And I think that's where having loads of people involved as discipline leads does help.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like you said, yeah, if your selection decisions are unanimously sort of agreed upon, then moving forward, like you've got a team that's working together.
But the hard thing too is, you know, as a coach of athletes who have done really well and raced themselves to the top of the Coop group, and then they go, and then I had Leon Rinman, really good coach, obviously coaches head, and he was like, why don't you trial so and so for the world's boat? And I was like, no, her ergo, I won't have that 8 if I don't have the ergos to back it up. We've got 3 weeks. I'm not going to change her physiology in 3 weeks. It's not going to suddenly go, you know, to X when she's putting Y. Yeah, she's a great boat mover. I know that in my own squad, but I also, with my GB hat on, have to serve the group. And that's what actually happened in Paris. Came down to having that bit of extra horsepower because, you know, the Americans were stacked that year. The Romanians put their top boat in that. It was New Zealand's top boat. You kind of go down the field, and Germans' top boat, and it was just like, this is going to be hard.
I felt like that never used to be a thing, right? The 8 was never the top boat. It was always Cox's 4, Cox's 4, Cox's 4. And now, again, maybe that's to do with the junior event at Henley, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for us, the 4 was our top boat. And that Italian 4 was sensational. You just look at Europeans' times; they were a really good 4, and for those 4 athletes in that 4, they had a stunning race. Look at where they've gone now. It's quite impressive. And what they're doing now, they're now part of the under 23 system. So yeah, I think it's hard to say where things are going to go, but we've seen Nani Luke who was in F4, who's at Texas now, and in that sensational 8 that raced recently, and she's a part of the under 23 group last year, and then you got Mads Greenstock, Martha Shepherd, who have done really good stuff, and at Stanford, Mads in the 4 last year that won gold, and you got Violet Holbrook Brooksbank, who is a sensational athlete herself. So we'll see more of them as they come back. But that 8 needed the horsepower. My athlete, of course, had a great experience at Coop and did really well. But there is that balance when you're discipline lead where you have to kind of hold the line and go, this is also partly GB funded. This is an Olympic pathway. We do, the athletes pay some of the money, but compared to what the actual cost of the event is, we have to have say in where we think our next under 23s are going, and without kind of trying to ruffle feathers, if we could, I'm sure there's a 740 ergo who moves boats better than some of the 725s who are currently trialing. But we also have to look at the long-term strength of rowing and the GB system moving on. So there's that kind of, I've got my Headington hat on and I've got my GB hat on, which can be quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I definitely think it's exciting for women's rowing. I know, we talked about when we had Miles Beeson on and the amount of gold medals that the under 23 men's team was putting together. You sort of look at the men's team like, Jesus, there's no room for anyone. Like, how are these incredible athletes going to sort of make a space? And some of them still have. On the women's side, I know there was a bit between sort of Tokyo and Paris where the women's 8 was sort of on and off. They didn't quite have the numbers or the standard, and that project came together quite late. And to think about like the names and the athletes and the medals that are coming through, I think it's really exciting for British rowing, for like all through those levels.
You look at the personalities who the personality who's taken over there. Andrew Randall, he's a sensational coach, has a really good interpersonal side with the athletes. So I think it's really exciting with what the senior program have to offer. Not to say that wasn't there before. Tom is a phenomenal coach, and I learned a huge amount from him, just following him and asking questions. And I'd say, kind of come down, and like the answer was always yes. When was a window, but it was always yes. Come down, follow some rowing, speak to coaches, have a coffee with us. And I think that's really special. Then you have people like that who are willing to open the doors at Caversham and go, I know you're not directly involved. And Andrew Randall is like, he's an open book. You ask him, he told me, because like, the quad rig was this for Tokyo and da-da-da. I'm like, okay, there's nothing special about it. It was really simple. And what they did was special, but it was simple. So, there's some fascinating people.
Some of the best programs, isn't it? Yeah, it's the simplicity that gets lost. Rowing really is just one very easy movement. We make it all very, very complicated.
Yeah.
Right. I've got a few questions for you, Ryan. A little change of pace.
Okay.
It is quite rare. I mean, you see it in the Dutch system a lot, that athletes will jump between sculling and sweep boats, and then they're able to perform a sort of World Championship Olympic standard between both. You do a similar thing with Headington, where, like you said, like you'll pull girls from the A and they'll do a pre-paddle like in the single. How do you think athletes are capable, all athletes are mostly capable, if taught in the right way, to both scull and sweep, or is that something that you have a specific approach for? Also for the development, for example, of their backs, because the later you go into sweep, the less back issues theoretically you should have. Obviously, it's not that blanche, but
yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, that's a really good question. You can be a great sculler and a great sweeper. You can't be a great sweeper and then suddenly go, I'm just going to pick up a sculling boat. But I think I could get some scullers who have 2 weeks of sculling under their belt. If they can move a scull fast and they've got the decent erg, I can pop them in a sweep system and they'll make, like Violet Halbrook-Brooksbank. She jumps in she did a pre-row session, 2 pre-row sessions with me, with one of my rowers. And then another girl, Aggie Burt, who was in that 8. Violet made the 4 in Paris, and they then won the April. I think it was Aggie Burt and Helena Purvis were first in the pair. So Helena was a sweeper, she had very capable sculler too, but Aggie, who was rowing with her, was a sculler. She had never picked up a sweep blade, and then you had Violet who jumped in and next thing. Doing well, and the next thing seat races herself into a world's boats, into the world's 4. So I do believe fully that scullers make great sweepers, and we've seen that time and time again. Take a sweeper who's only rowed sweep, and they go, I'm great in a sweep boat. It's like, no, you're not. Yeah, your 8 is great around you, and you just facilitate that. And an 8's about facilitation, right? It's can you facilitate a fast moving 8? Can you read the speed of the hull and the rhythm and the dynamics that move an 8 fast? But unless you've got that boat feel and that sculling skill, I don't call you an athlete. I don't think you're good. I'm sorry. I'm upsetting a lot of people here, but I myself did a lot of sweep when I was rowing, and I was really humbled when I had to kind of jump in a scull. Mm-hmm. Christian was like, you need to scull, and I was being humbled every single day. So I think anyone who's a good oarsman should scull, because also the loading area of a sculling blade is more than that of a sweep blade. So you talk about back stuff, and I think you're loading symmetrically. You can feel the boat. You have to set the boat yourself. You're not relying on everyone else to set the boat. So I think scullers, we've seen it with the Sinkovic guy. They jump on the sculls and the double scull into the pair and still do really well. I would, when I speak to coaches here, they go, but my river doesn't facilitate that, and we need to jump in the 8s. Like, don't be afraid to go out and, when over our rowing camp in April, we rode pairs and singles far more than we rode the 8. I mean, I think we got the 8 out, but 5 times in 20 sessions. You know, it's a 10-day camp. So we do 2 sessions a day. Like, you know, the skull and the sweep boats are bedrock. Sorry, the pair is the bedrock of what we do, and I think it makes for a better all-rounded athlete. And also, again, like, yeah, it's nice to win Henley, and that's always my goal. But ultimately, I've got to also prepare them for the US, where they're not going to be doing that kind of stuff, that they are going to be flogged, and they need to be resilient, and resilience is built in a single.
So this kind of, I love that perspective a lot about switching from sculling to sweep and building that foundation. Would you say that this is the best way to teach boat feel, or is there another way that you can teach boat feel? Because the reason why I asked that is that there's so much work that there can be also done on the rowing machine in order to facilitate boat feel. Because technique is form, but it's also the power application and how your body sort of links together in order to apply. You need to, there's a lot of moving parts. There's the core, there's the holding the finish, there's the form, flat wrists, obviously all of those things. But you're also one of the only coaches that I've seen that uses drag factor as a way to also vary that power application in how you do, because in certain conditions that kind of comes down to gearing, and we used to do a lot of that work at Leander, but outside of that you might be the only coach I've seen that does that kind of work.
I mean, I got the idea from Richard Bolton, who was the head coach of the juniors for many years, immensely successful and a phenomenal coach. Again, in 2010 when I was coaching that 8, people kind of go, first gold medal, blah blah. Richard Bolton was there like 90% of the sessions. So actually, all credit to him, and he was a phenomenal mentor. He would be like, at Hampton, he'd put a shirt over the fan and just go like you need to learn how to pick up the flywheel, not with the hands and not with the body. And it's like, that engagement with the foot plates. And, we look at telemetry now and we go, okay, what is our 0.7 and kind of all the fancy language. He was doing that way before telemetry, in terms of how we accelerate off the foot plate. I do play around with that a lot. We row on the lowest drag we can, most of the time. You can kind of be like the gym buffs, and I kind of use drag as a rowing equivalent to what we see in the gym. So you got a row will have it on like say 5, and they'll see a gym guy, and they shake their head and they put it down from 10 back to 5, and they row on their 5, and then someone next to them throws it up to 10 again. In my view, like rowing on those heavy drags, that's the same as the gym buff, whatever 5, going, okay, cool. Like, what are we focusing on? We're trying to focus on physiology. Yeah, we are. But why not just teach a skill and just drop the drag right down to 0? That's what we do. And you've seen us on the tracks too. So, in our little ergo room. So, all the ergos are on sliders or tracks. And so we'll use that a lot. And we'll pull up the drag for testing, for GB testing and stuff, because we've got this bank of knowledge. So we'll put it up to recommended drag factor. And then we'll pop it straight down for training. But also, we don't just train the ergo. So we do ergo, bike, ergo. We'll break up the ergo. So we're never loading the back for too long, because I don't want them getting injured on the ergo. Like if they get injured, it happens on the water because there might be something structurally wrong. So, there's another whole conversation about that in terms of prehab and rehab. But when we look at how they essentially, that foot place force, that low drag is a really good way to teach that, and how to accelerate properly and hold the splits they want to hold. It's because it's hard. When you run a low drag, it's like cycling on a low gear. You just want to spin out. And then obviously, we got the RP3s, and we will set the power curve up and synchronize that. So the movement synchronization, the handle speeds, all that kind of stuff, the body speeds, the rockovers, rowing in time, we do that all the time. And I think years ago, Brooks used to kind of like take the piss out of us for all rowing in time, and then the next thing they're all rowing in time in the room. And I remember speaking to one of the coaches, and he was like, "Yeah, we started rowing in time." But that's how we were trying to teach that. And then, I'm not saying that we were the first. I got the idea from other people. But then when we got on the RP3s, we could then follow the power curve really well. And again, it's a low drag, and trying to work.
And you can't still achieve your splits on a low drag, because we used to do that. I would ask the coach, what split should we do? The same. What do you mean the same? It's so much different. Like, no, the same. And then okay, after 5 minutes, you are doing the same splits.
The ergo is significantly heavier than the ATAs in terms of actual drag. So I think we're not teaching that kind of neuromuscular kind of how fast things move and that agility, because rowing there's agility in rowing. It's like, jumping off a box, landing, jumping again. There's a real dynamic agility to it. And that, you speak to Valeri Kolesnev, he talks about how to interact with the front end, and that kind of, he terms it a bounce, like a trampoline. But there is that pickup. So when you got the sliders there, it's how do you pick up the front end, and how do you time that with the spoon, and where is that force coming from? Is it, and one of my interview questions is always like, which leg is the dominant leg? So which arm is the dominant arm? They go outside arm. Which leg's the dominant leg? And they go outside. And it's like, nope. It's like, so it's inside leg. So how do we row that, and how do we teach that? So obviously in sculling, you've got both legs working, and on the ergo it's both legs. But then you've got to have the dynamicism when you then go to, is that rotational inside leg, all that kind of stuff. So you've got to teach the agility, because also for some of the rowers, that inside leg might be their left leg, it might not be their dominant leg, might not be the one they kick with. So they're not agile. And you just do some kind of one leg movement pattern stuff, RDL, one leg RDL stuff, and you just see how there's a disconnect between what's their dominant glute and what isn't. So yeah, it's interesting.
You've just described how to teach any athlete how to do a boat field. That's absolutely phenomenal of an explanation.
Well, there's just so much more you can do with a row machine. I don't know whether we do. I think I always kind of laugh how much time we spend on the machine compared to on the water. Like, there are other sports that are definitely not using indoor machines as much. It's a great tool. It's definitely allowed, in this country with awful weather and timetables and things that you have to work around. It's brilliant. But it just became like a tick box exercise. Like, we're going to do 16K more, go and do it. Write your name on the sheet. There's probably not even a coach in the room watching. Just tick it off. It's just miles that you need to tick off. And I sort of think that if you were just ticking off, if you were just doing it purely for fitness, you should probably do it on a different machine, because if you're going to go through the motions and start bedding in the wrong thing, but then start listening, talking to more people, and certainly what you're talking about, it's like there's so many more things you can do with that machine. You can have much more proactive or make it work with what you're trying to do, and not just, like you said, junk miles.
Yeah, I mean, like simple things like single leg rowing. Like how do you connect? Simple things. Like, it's actually a really good technical tool. It's a really good technical tool for the front end. If you want to teach the front end right, get it right on the ergo, the shape of the handle as it moves. But so many people go in and they go out because they want to keep the handle flat, because they think the extra movement's gonna. And it's like, I'm sorry, like, that needs to be a functional tool for the water, not just, I want to get a big ergo score. So I hate it when I see people doing this. It kills my soul, because that's not how we row. Try to do a bench pull where you do this at the end of the bench pull. So ridiculous. And then we see people doing this at a high performance doing this, and it kills me.
Over the head.
Yeah, it's like, I'm rowing longer, because I'm like, you're rowing like strength before length. Come on, there's. So I would like to see someone do an ergo test that is. It's kind of like going, what's the cheat sheet for an ergo test? You can do this, but actually, if we keep elbows flat, might be a bit stronger. Might not be as long, might not keep the fan moving as long, but actually be a true reflection of what your potential water speed will be. So I think what we need to do is hold people to task on that more, and we don't do that enough. So I think it's also that kind of shared idea, like Australia's got some really good learning resources on rowing. Like, they are years ahead of us on that. We have our bronze award and all that kind of stuff that kind of, if you can get onto a course. But like, what are the actual bread and butter things like that we should have a coaching license. And I firmly believe that you should have a coaching license. And and you should be upskilling. You should be upskilling really regularly. And
if you have a coaching license, what do you then do about pausing at the finish in the boat?
Yeah, there are reasons why some crews might do that. I remember speaking to Henry, who used to run Brooks. I know, he would have that, and he just called it a gather point, because he had people coming from so many different places. I don't particularly like it, because I want the handle to move, and I don't think women can particularly, they're not strong enough to kind of have that momentary pause, and allow the boat to sit down and kind of just drag into the water around the back end. Whereas with Brooks, they would do that, but they wouldn't pause in racing. Their handle would be translating around the turn. I don't like to train that, but I do use that as a kind of a sit time, and where's our body position on the seat around the finish, and what's the outside hand doing on the back end, what's the inside hand doing. So what's right or wrong? I know there was a thing about people filming kind of the Dutch fall and going, okay, that's the model to row, and then filming the a lightweight fall, and then filming the Aussie fall, the awesome foursome, going, okay, that's how everyone's going to row. There are many ways to skin a cat, but there are certain foundations that we need to have place before you press. Simple, like have a load on the spoon before you push the foot plate.
Yeah.
So the hands body slide.
I was curious about your thoughts on that pause. It is quite a hot topic.
It is, yeah, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, if the handle's moving at pace, there's handle speed in, handle speed out, then it's going fast.
I really like it in training, but in racing, always keep the hands moving.
No one pauses in racing. No one's ever paused in racing. Like, that's not what it's about. And I think it's you were talking about, but it's crew specific. Like, if you have a crew which doesn't have, like you said, the strength or the confidence to hold them at the back without starting to drag and creating a pause, if you've got a crew that's beyond that point technically, then like you said, to that gather point, it always disappears as the rate comes up.
I never saw, when Brooks were kind of winning all those medals, I never saw them pause at the finish.
I think it's just it's like a technical.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
They if anything, they timed the finish really well. But also, when you went down and you sat in the launches, you would see them as they went into pace, the handle would keep moving. Whenever they train pace often, but they're trained that gather and that timing of the back end really well, because again, they're coming from so many different programs. So is it right or wrong?
It makes total sense, the way that you've described when it could be used, for example, for something beneficial. Before we jump into quick fires and finish off, I just have one last question. And that is that we at Henley tend to see quite a few junior crews enter the temple. Are we ever going to see Headington challenge for the island?
No, mainly because our quadders, whether we do an 8 or quad as our lead boat, we always do those boats. And I think that's when you start losing the ability to have the strength to do that. The island is going to be furiously competitive. And I think, also, kind of the universities, they are fast, and they're getting faster. Like back in the day when I was arguing for an event at Henley, I would enter a Headington crew with my leftovers who weren't trying for GB into the remnant, just upset the kind of like start order list type thing. Or I'd enter a half Oxford, half Headington boat for that. And I think the 1 year they were like one pace off qualifying, but rowing has moved on so much, and the thought of even coming close to any of that is just, it's not. And now that the US crews can come over every single year, it's a different dynamic. They are bringing a standard that's only going to lift our standard here in the UK. And we were starting to see coaches. I'm getting more UK coaches reaching out to me and coming and jumping in launches, whereas previously that didn't happen. I say more. I've had two coaches, come down, and they've both been the Oxford lot. Oxford and Cambridge have both come and spoken to the girls. One at the Met, and one obviously, Alan is fairly close, so he came down this past weekend to jump out and speak to the girls. But I think that's going to happen more and more. I think also the application process for university is slightly different to the US. In the US, you can get spots if you hit the academic criteria, and they've got rowing spots they can fill. Whereas here, rowing's not really considered in that, which is a bit sad, because actually we see in business in London and whatever, those top MDs, those top business guys are from a sporting background. They've played rugby, they've done hockey to a high level, they've done rowing to a high level. And I think when universities maybe cotton onto that one day, I think we'll see culturally across the whole of the UK, it will be benefit everyone.
Fantastic answer. Thank you.
Cool. Good question as well.
Yeah. Let's go to quick fires. Quick questions, not necessarily quick answers, is up to you. Out of all the rowing venues that you've trained at, raced at, coached at, or visited, what are some of your favorites?
Training, without a doubt, for Kawi in South Africa. There is no better place on the planet to train. If you ever get a chance to look up the Kawi River, and you got these kind of golden beaches, a river that goes up 22 odd K. And I was really privileged to grow up. I'm biased. I rode there when I was at school, and I rode there when I was at university. It's the venue for the school's boat race house in South Africa.
It beats Godstow a bit.
Oh, it's just it's heaven, absolutely heaven. Like, you know, you would do some night rows, and because the tide would bring in these phosphorescence, you'd be rowing back, and it just come dark, and next thing, kind of the boat lights up. And I don't know if you know what phosphorescence are, but it's like it's an algae kind of bacteria that just gets stimulated when they're disturbed.
Have you seen it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
And you get these blades that come in, and the blades will just light up with this like phosphorescent green color. And
Really like these showing the colours every time when it gets like moved around. So as the blade hits it, the water around it will turn into that kind of green.
That's cool.
just absolutely stunning. And then, and also you just had miles. And then when you got up a bit further, it's a game reserve. It's South Africa. It's like, I think people will never understand it until they've been there. I've had athletes who I've coached. I said, go do some time out in South Africa. And, Emily Piggott is an example. She went out there after doing her Oxford thing. She hasn't moved back. She's married out there. She's it's a stunning place. Yeah. People always ask me, why are you still here? Well, rowing is if there's a lot more rowing going on over there, and not to say there isn't a high level, there is, there are pockets of that, but, go to a camp there. I highly recommend it. You won't find a better place on the planet. So
we've not heard that answer before.
And then, in terms of racing, Henley is always, for me as a women's coach, when I was amazed when I first arrived here, and I didn't really understand the whole Henley thing, if I'm being honest. It wasn't really much on my radar. I wanted to go, but it never occurred to me there was a men's only event. Like, it didn't occur to me. So when Andy was like, we're going to Henley, and I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, that's not the fact. And then I turned up, and it was Henley Women's, and it was, magnificent. It's a fantastic women's event, and I'm really grateful that they put that on. And with Henley Royal adding women's events, it's only made Henley Women's a better and bigger event, and love what they do, and they are steadfast stewards for women's rowing. And it also helps, I think, women with that event. So we know we're going to get some class practice for that event. But then you always got Henley Royal, and I think Henley Royal is a really special place because of what it is. It is anywhere in the world you will not find an event. And people go, I won the NCAAs or done this. It's like, great. Well then, pat on the back. You haven't won Henley. Like, that is the event to do. And don't. I've got friends who are Olympians who've won medals who go, I haven't got a Henley medal, and it really annoys me. So,
yeah, this is the one.
I love it.
Oh no, you've got a question.
I've got a question. If you were to repeat one race or one event again, either to relive it or change the result, when you're 70, what would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't think I would ever change anything. I mean, there's one race where I was a stroke of my Rhodes University boat race crew that had like a 4-boat boat lead, kind of like, and we're on for the kind of, the 11th win in a row. And we were like we were caning it. Like, I was having the best time of my life, and sitting at 36 strokes a minute, this is cheering it up. And came around the corner into a bit of a headwind and got a bit heavy. And I was like, okay, no, it's fine. Like, we got like 4 lengths. Came around the next corner, and now it's like level, and this crew overtook us. And I had sleepless nights for like months after that. Months. And people are like, oh, it was so-and-so's fault, it was so-and-so's fault. And in my head, I was like, well, I sat at 36, and maybe the crew was a bit too young. And I could have maybe helped it up by sitting at 34. I'm not an Olympic crew. And why was I expecting my crew to do that? So I had sleepless nights, like devastated about that. But would I change it? No, because I've learned so much from that. So and all credit to the crew that beat us. They deserved it, and actually it changed the tone of South African rowing. Suddenly Rhodes wasn't this insurmountable thing that couldn't be beaten. It could be beaten, and actually I think it did South African rowing good. So
Crazy.
Amazing.
Great story. I normally ask, if you could travel back in time to the age you first fell in love with rowing, what advice would you give that young boy?
stick with rugby. It will pay more. No, what advice would I give? Just keep doing what you're doing. Like, I think things happen for a reason, and I'm a big believer in fate and what things would happen. I think the one advice I'll probably give is when I moved over to UK, like I didn't take the opportunities to go back to South Africa and see family and do that kind of stuff because, like I as a teacher, so I worked term time and then the holidays were too expensive. Suddenly you're paying £1,400 for a flight because it's prime time, so I kind of missed those holidays and I missed that kind of stuff. Even for my mom got remarried, I went over literally for the weekend because it was, we're in the rowing season and I had school stuff to go and our head at the time was like, Ryan, you can have more time. And I was like, no, I need to get back. And actually probably pausing and, because life is, is finite. And, I kind of always thought, one will be there later. That's not the case. So, you miss those things. So probably if I was to go back, I'd kind of go back to myself when I started at Headington and I'd go, it's okay. Like leave it in the other coach's hands. It's fine. You can have a breather. And I see coaches making that mistake now. It's like you've got glass balls and you've got kind of rubber balls. The rubber balls always bounce back. Mm-hmm. Glass balls, once you drop them, you do drop them and they're gone. And like family is that glass ball, and I think I missed out on that one. The rubber ball thing is like, Headington will be there. And if Headington could kind of, okay, Ryan, enough of you now, get rid of you. Someone will take over. And I really hope someone would serve Headington in the way that I would hope they'll serve it, but not at the cost that I maybe served in my early years. Now I'm much more confident. Like I took some holiday, like, at the end of after rowing camp and a week away, with my other half. And, that was awesome. And Chris and Antonia were seamless. There was a time where Chris and I were ill over December and we're like, God, the girls have no one. And so we said to the PE team, look after them. The girls' sessions were so efficient. They were like on it and they were just nailed it. And then they were like, oh, Ryan, it's almost better without you. And I was like, okay. And that was also, coming back to your thing about the evolution of girls taking control of things. Yeah. That's where that came from. So, suddenly, I think that's probably the advice I'd give myself.
That's awesome. That's
an incredible answer.
I would just also then as well say, for maybe similar question, what advice would you give for someone young, aspiring coach? I think you probably alluded to this already, but.
Yeah. The reason why I moved to the UK is I was in Athens and I was like, I'm out of my depth. I'm running the quad. Yeah, it was the best the quad had ever done, but I didn't feel I had served them well. They were second in the B final. Every other quad had been like last at the Worlds. The 8 had come last. And then, we selected it to give these guys a chance. It was great that so many people from there continued rowing. But again, it didn't function the way it should have. The 4 got a bronze, which was John Gehring's magic. And I looked over and I saw these kind of bald guys. John Lang was one of them. And he was on it. And Shep, another, and there's a few other coaches. I'm sure Thrust was around then. Mm-hmm. But it was just like, they just were so organized. They were always in their GB kit. They were a polished unit. And I had an opportunity to go do a master's at the University of Leipzig. They kept giving me a scholarship to go do that. Or just roll the dice and come to the UK, hope to get a job in a rowing school and try navigate that program. So arrived in April 2004 and 2006, thanks to Andy Green's kind of good words to Richard Bolton Thrust. And I got a 4 at the Coop. Like you work in the GB team and do not underestimate the John Lang factor, the Shep factor, just the amount of knowledge that is there and how good they are. So I'd say roll the dice, but also surround you, get into a program where you can learn and don't be a rush to leave. Like if you're 22, 23, 24, 25, 20, up to you 30, if you haven't worked in a program where you've really teased out the nuts and bolts of it, then stay where you are. I was lucky I had Andy Green, if I'm being really honest. Like, he was a great mentor and one of the guys who shaped where I am today. Thrust, another one. John Lang, just he's on your, he will be on your case, but he's so methodically organized and the greatest team. I would say the reason why the junior system is so successful. So there are those people positioned, and if you can position yourself with those guys, brilliant. I talked about Tom Simpson a few times. See that younger member of, I'm almost jealous of him because he's way ahead of where I was at that age. But he's also being patient and he's learning the arts and he's learning from Chris and he's learning from myself. But it's nice watching that, and as he comes through, we'll give him more responsibility and more responsibility and more responsibility. And that's kind of what happened with Chris. Chris joined me as a boatman coach. Then I became director of sport, and he was around, and he took on more admin and then the next thing became head of rowing. And then, kind of as they moved, I then went to performance director, and Chris is now, I would argue, one of the best heads of rowing anywhere in the world. So surround yourself with those people. If you're young, don't be in a rush to head up a program because you might fall on your sword. Be careful of what you wish for. Learn from people. Spend your 20s learning, your 30s establishing yourself, your 40s and 50s really making that establishment a great place.
Yeah. Great advice again.
Phenomenal. You're just a fountain of just wisdom, and not just rowing, cross applicable to so many other disciplines. And I know so many people look up to you in this country and outside of this country too. And I'm hoping that with this podcast, we're able to sort of share some of that knowledge outside of the UK as well. But who are some of your rowing idols? The people that you've looked up to either during or post your career?
I mean, that's a good question. John Gearing, phenomenal human being. I learned a lot from him. I wouldn't say idol's the wrong thing. I can't even remember the guy's name, but he was the physio for our Beijing test event in 2007. We went to Beijing. I was coaching the pair, and he stood up there and he just really articulated what way he talked with his hands, and his body language is great, and he was just really presentable and how he did. I was like, I'd love some of that. So I think mirroring is probably the right way, rather than idling. I try and mirror what some people do. So my interactions and how I now articulate and speak is mirrored off him. Can't even remember what his name is, but I've got lots to thank him about. But then you've got people like Richard Bolton, you've got Shep, who's phenomenal, and you've got John Lang, who organizationally is just, and the way he kind of holds steadfast to certain things. The people in South Africa, Ron McDonald, one of my closest friends, but just, the way he's training philosophy and the way his ethos is. I think there's loads of people in the rowing circles who I can look really highly to. Tim Hempstead, the way he coached us. I remember doing the most brutal pieces up and down the lake, and lying on the landing stage at the end, and he kind of came up and he goes, "All right, guys, get up," and he gave us a rice cake with some peanut butter on it. Oh, some nutritious meal, and then gave us this massive hug, and he's going, "My boy, okay." And kind of there are those elements that I think we can take into our rowing. But then there's also exceptional pupils you kind of really look up to. You kind of man, you've been through the mill, but you're so impressive, and the way you've kind of conduct yourself. I think that's the thing is we kind of look for one sole kind of leader, but I think everywhere we look, there are people who kind of conduct themselves beautifully, and those are the kind of people I look towards. So yeah,
that's great as well. Yeah, you don't have to look at the full package. You can take bits that you like from everyone around you. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so many coaches I haven't even mentioned in this, and who have been instrumental in our world. And I'll probably get to the end of this and go, "Oh, damn it, I should mention so-and-so."
It's okay, we're not too far away from you. We'll definitely invite you back on.
No, it's cool. But thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Ryan, I can't describe how much I've been looking forward to this chat and how it's blown my mind, exceeded all expectations. Thank you for your time. I wish you all the best of luck with your career, with the crews you're coaching. Keep doing what you're doing, because I'm convinced that you're making the sport a better place.
Well, thank you. But again, kudos to all the coaches in the community. Every one of the coaches I've raced against has been has pushed us, really pushed me as a person. And I think that's where growth happens.
Yeah.
So, sure. And I'm eternally thankful to those guys. So, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks very much. Yeah,
Good.
really appreciate it. Again, I'll just mirror it and say, best of luck for things to come. And hopefully, maybe some point, Henley, we can grab a Pimm's.
Yeah. Well, that's my office. So I don't drink in my office.
We'll figure something out.
Biggest thing, I'll have a coffee.
An alcohol-free Pimm's. Yeah.
As for today, this concludes everything for this episode. So on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.